Hi, everyone. Thanks, as always, for joining us here in the Treehouse. I know I typically remind you here at the top of the show to check the show notes for our list of sources and content warnings, but since this month's entry involves some heavier topics than normal, I wanted to encourage you to be particularly mindful this time around. Holes deals pretty frankly with depictions of racial violence, including lynching and extensive child abuse. And while I think it leads to some valuable conversations about those topics, if that sounds a bit intense for you at the moment, maybe give this episode a pass until you're in the right headspace. As always, if you would like to connect with us or share ideas for future episodes, you can find us on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Facebook at A Safe Place for Boys, or email us at safeplaceforboys@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, stay safe out there, and enjoy the show. There is no lake at Camp Green Lake. There once was a very large lake here, the largest lake in Texas. That was over 100 years ago. Now it is just a dry, flat wasteland. There used to be a town of Green Lake as well. The town shriveled and dried up along with the lake and the people who lived there. During the summer, the daytime temperature hovers around 95 degrees in the shade, if you can find any shade. There's not much shade in a big dry lake. The only trees are 2 old oaks on the eastern edge of the lake. A hammock is stretched between the 2 trees, and a log cabin stands behind that. The campers are forbidden to lie in the hammock. It belongs to the warden. The warden owns the shade. Out on the lake, rattlesnakes and scorpions find shade under rocks and in the holes dug by the campers. Here's a good rule to remember about rattlesnakes and scorpions. If you don't bother them, they won't bother you. Usually. Being bitten by a scorpion or even a rattlesnake is not the worst thing that can happen to you. You won't die. Usually. Sometimes a camper will try to be bitten by a scorpion or even a small rattlesnake. Then he will get to spend a day or 2 recovering in his tent instead of having to dig a hole out on the lake. But you don't want to be bitten by a yellow-spotted lizard. That's the worst thing that can happen to you. You will die a slow and painful death. Always. If you get bitten by a yellow-spotted lizard, you might as well go into the shade of the oak trees and lie in the hammock. There is nothing anyone can do to you anymore. The reader is probably asking, why would anyone go to Camp Green Lake? Most campers weren't given a choice. Camp Green Lake is a camp for bad boys. If you take a bad boy and make him dig a hole every day in the hot sun, it will turn him into a good boy. That's what some people thought. Stanley Yelnats was given a choice. The judge said, you may go to jail, or you may go to Camp Green Lake. Stanley was from a poor family. He had never been to camp before. Welcome to A Safe Place for Boys, compassionate conversations about masculinity in media. I am your host, Kelcee Sykes. With me, as always, is the man that I call by the name that society will recognize him under when he finally gets out of this place, Dr. Spencer Todd Bennington, PhD. How are you, Spencer?
Yo, mic check. Mic check 1, 2. What up, Tent D? It's Dr. B. Got a shovel in my hand, a.k.a. an SPADE. Digging in the dirt, removing the curse from my family. Word to Stan Lee and Hector Z. What's up?
Wow.
I'm in the building. I'm digging up that hole. I'm digging up that hole.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was legitimately impressive. How long did you spend thinking about that?
Literally, I just wrote this down.
Wrote it down. I
wrote
thought
this
that
down.
Was freestyle.
Well, I mean, it was freestyle 5 minutes ago, and I was like, "Oh shit, I don't want to forget that. I'm gonna write it on a post-it note right before we recorded." Yeah, I was very proud of myself because I was like, I don't know, she's got a good intro for me. What do I have? What up, Tent D? It's Dr. B. Yeah. Also, for the record, you don't call me by my government name. ever. So
that's true. I've never once called you by your. I have a mean-spirited nickname for you based on your body odor or the kind of crimes you like to commit.
Yeah. Okay. I was like, do you not tell it to me?
No.
You just called me that to other people?
No.
Behind my back on this podcast?
Yeah, this is an intervention.
When I take my headphones off, you call me...
Name it.
I'll just say armpit.
Yeah, I've been calling you armpit this whole time.
The name that came to mind was dick fart, and I don't know what that means.
I don't either, but it does sound like something a bunch of 13-year-olds would call each other. Mm-hmm. So we're still on theme around here. Why are we coming up with nicknames for each other today?
Because I just realized I don't know what happened to Barf Bag in the movie Holes.
Oh, he went to the hospital.
Yeah, but then what? Why didn't he?
I don't know.
Is he dead?
Probably.
That sucks.
No. Barf Bag got bit by a rattlesnake, and a rattlesnake bite won't kill you.
Right.
Usually.
Mostly. Mostly.
Yeah, we're talking about holes.
We're digging
today.
up that hole from 2004.
It's 2003, actually.
2003,
I looked it up. We're so close.
Actually.
Yeah, this, we were going to talk about a different Disney movie that I did some research about, and it turns out there's problems with it. So we replaced it with one that I forgot about until I watched here's a plug for a person who doesn't need us to plug them, a Jacob Geller video on YouTube about digging holes. His video is just about digging holes, and he mentions holes, and I was like, oh shit, holes! That's a good one.
I missed this one. I guess I was the one in the hole.
Yeah.
When this movie came out.
You were just out in the backyard digging furiously.
I think I was just barely too old for it. Other people saw it and I didn't. I guess I thought it was more of a kid's movie and I was a teenager. So not like the boys in this movie who were also teenagers. I don't know. Also, because maybe Even Stevens was popular at this point.
Yeah. This was either peak Even Stevens or just after Even Stevens. But this was certainly peak Shia LaBeouf.
Yeah. So I just thought of like goofy Even Stevens, Shia LaBeouf. And I was like, I don't want to go see that.
No, Shia LaBeouf doesn't play Goofy. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm going to keep the sad sigh in there before you do the rim shot.
Anywho, so
yeah,
I didn't watch this as a kid. This was really my first go around, and I gotta say, pretty dang good.
It's pretty good.
I liked it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
One of the better, I mean, this is a me opinion, I guess, not a definitive ranking. One of the better book to movie adaptations ever, I think, personally.
Yeah. And one of us read the book before.
I did. I mean, I read it as a child, and then I read it again this week because I was like, you know what? It's not a very long book.
Yeah.
I'm a grown-up and I can read faster than I used to be able to. That's actually not true. I read way slower now than I used to. But I did reread the book Holes in preparation for watching the movie Holes, and I've got the whole... It's like Galaxy Brain. I can see all the connections of the 3 discrete storylines.
Are there any, like, really big differences between the book and the movie so that our audience... friends out here that have just watched it, is there any like major difference that we should address up top or anything?
There are some minor differences. In the book, they specify that Stanley is overweight, and that's like part of why they refer to him as Caveman, because he's like a big dude, which of course is lost in the movie.
Right.
This is a tiny little baby Shia LaBeouf. There are some, like, differences in dialogue that, depending on if you're in the book or the movie, are maybe a bit more impactful. We'll get to a big difference. Well, not a big difference, but what I believe to be a notable difference towards the end of the story. I will mention one that I think is sort of a significant change from the book to the movie. But for the most part, it is a very, very faithful adaptation.
Cool. Probably a good book then.
Now that I'm saying this, one of the bigger departures is the opening of the movie.
All right.
So, in the movie, our story begins in the desert, where, as we mentioned previously, a boy named Barf Bag is digging a hole. So we see this boy, we only know that he is named Barf Bag because we see that he's got this big old, like, jug of water with his name written on it. And he is climbing up out of a hole and comes eye to eye with... Rattlesnake.
Snake.
Rattlesnake. And I feel like this is a good tone-setting scene immediately because you're like, oh shit, a snake. And what Barfbag does is takes his shoe off. And so you're just like, oh no, Barfbag, no, don't do it. But he does do it. Yeah. He just puts his foot in that fucking rattlesnake's mouth.
Yeah.
And I had forgotten, because I haven't seen this movie in years, I'd forgotten that all of the other boys were, like, watching him do it.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, in my memory, he was alone when this scene was happening. But no, all of the other boys are looking over and they're like, whoa, dude, whoa.
Don't do it, Barfbag.
Stop. No,
it's not that
it's
bad.
Not worth it.
Yeah.
But he sure does. He sure does just stick his whole foot in a rattlesnake's mouth.
Yeah.
And then he screams, and then we cut to a pair of shoes falling on Shia LaBeouf's head.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's all about feet in this movie.
It is all about feet.
It is unfortunately quite a bit about feet.
Yeah. Sweet feet and stanky feet.
Yep.
First they're sour, then they're sweet.
Jesus. Why didn't that slogan take off?
I don't know.
So weird. Yeah, so the boy who has just been beamed in the head with a pair of tennis shoes. Actually, they're not tennis shoes. They're like spikes.
Yeah, they're baseball cleats.
Shoes. This boy is named Stanley Yelnats IV.
Yep.
And Stanley, as our narrator, who is also Shia LaBeouf, informs us, has really bad luck.
Mm-hmm.
Such bad luck that his family says that they are cursed.
Yeah.
But Stanley isn't so sure about all that. He thinks he just kind of has a habit of being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Mm-hmm.
And in this instance, Stanley, who is just kind of walking along on the sidewalk, minding his own business, picks up these shoes that have just fallen on his head and is like, cool, shoes.
Right.
And then he is immediately arrested for doing that.
Yep.
Well, actually, he also, runs.
Yeah.
He grabs the shoes and then starts running, which I guess is why the police are like, hey,
right.
You, get back here.
Why are you running? Yeah, also, at this point, when the police sort of arrested him, I'm thinking, this movie is unbelievable. Even if they were Jordans, come on. It's just shoes.
What, are you going to arrest a kid over some shoes? Yes, they are. And there is a reason that they're going to do that, but they don't tell us what it is now.
Right.
The order of operations here is also very strange. So the police, arrest Stanley and then bring him back to his apartment. It's implied right after they arrest him.
Mm-hmm.
And just start looking through his house.
Yeah.
Just sort of randomly, just sort of wandering around in his apartment while his parents and his grandfather are there. And the various interactions that all of these different family members are having is very funny. Because Grandpa is a cab all day. Yeah. Don't talk to them. Don't tell them anything.
Right.
These people are not to be trusted. And then his parents are just kind of dicking around.
Right.
Their house is just full of shoes.
Mm-hmm.
This is the other thing. Their house is full of shoes. Perhaps this is why Stanley was great, free shoes. Mm-hmm. That's what my house needs more of, is shoes. Because his dad is a sort of aspiring inventor who is trying to find the cure for foot odor.
Mm-hmm.
And so their house is just full of disgusting shoes.
Yeah.
To the extent that when the neighbors see that the police are there, they're like, oh, thank God, please tell that guy to get all those gross shoes out of his apartment. Our whole apartment complex smells like shoes. Stanley's grandfather, who's also, of course, named Stanley, as is his father, everybody's named Stanley, except for his mom, whose name I don't know, is trying to be Stanley, don't cooperate with them, don't cooperate. But Stanley is just sort of oh yeah, this is my bedroom over here, you can look through my bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
Just fully, what do you think is happening here, bud? And we come to find out that the reason Grandpa Stanley is as sort of suspicious and negative as he is because he is a big believer in this curse. He is the first person in the movie to invoke Stanley IV's no good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
And he is that's the guy who cursed all of the men in our family, and that's why all of these bad things are happening to you now. We do get the sense that Stanley IV is supremely unlucky, because, of course, his family cannot afford a lawyer. Once again, we have returned to the realm of what happens to people who can't afford lawyers. And so he goes to court for stealing those shoes. Again, they don't tell us why these shoes are so important, but they're important enough that they're sending this child to jail for them.
Don't worry. No, this is a really kind judge who gives him a choice. He says, no, you can go to jail or...
there's a vacancy that just opened up at Camp Green Lake. You can go to jail or you can go to camp. And he does not give them any information about what this camp entails.
Stanley says, well, I've never been to camp.
He certainly doesn't sound like that, but yes.
Oh, golly. I've never been to camp.
George Bailey is back. Get him out of here. Yeah, Stanley's reaction is like, well, I've never gotten to go to camp before. And I will say, not a lot of pushback from Stanley's parents here. Mm-hmm. They ask absolutely no follow-up questions whatsoever.
Nope.
And it's sort of implied, fully thinking he's being sent to like a fun summer camp. But off to the desert he goes. So we see Stanley on a school bus being driven out into the middle of the desert. On the way, he hallucinates actor Dule Hill just out in the desert. Because, oh yeah, something you need to know about this story is that it is 100% a magical realism story. That is the genre that this story falls into, interestingly.
I just thought...
Keep that in your back pocket.
Stanley and the rest of the Yell-Natzes were just like on a West Wing binge.
And seeing Dule everywhere.
And he never got to finish season 4. And so on that bus ride, he was just like, what happens? Is Dule Hill? I can't even remember.
Will he get to date the president's daughter successfully?
Is he going to get shot for the president?
Well, that's like season 1, but and he doesn't. Josh Lyman does. Anyway, and I suppose the president does too, doesn't he? Anyway, this is not a West Wing podcast yet. So Stanley is looking around. He arrives at Camp Green Lake, notices that there is something missing.
Mm-hmm.
What's missing?
The green.
And?
The lake.
The lake. Yeah, there is, suspiciously, no lake here. As he's climbing out of the bus, he asks the, cop guard person, hey, where is the lake? And the guy's like, don't be a wise guy.
Yeah.
Which is I don't think he was.
Yeah.
But okay. The cop takes him into one of the buildings to talk to
Mr. Sir.
Mr. Sir, played by, I think this is Jon Voight's best work. Everything about this character is as unhinged as possible. Can you describe what this man looks like?
Sort of like if Joe Dirt was older and seemed to have had some amount, not an embarrassing amount, but some amount of plastic surgery. That's kind of my read on Mr. Sir.
His hair is in a almost pompadour. His hair isn't long enough to do the Elvis thing, but he does have it brushed back into the shape of an eraser on his head, like a pencil eraser on his head. He has clearly grown out his sideburns into the start of a beard, but then he didn't want the beard there, so he cut off the beard in a very straight line in the side of his cheek, but left the very tail end across his cheek of beard sideburn.
They're amazing lightning bolts, is what they are.
They're not even lightning bolt shaped. It's just one little spike of hair going across his cheek. It's fantastic. Mr. Sir is in a bad mood, though.
Yeah. He just quit smoking kids. Sorry, I guess I could have put the pause differently. He just quit smoking kids.
Kids. So he is just chowing down on sunflower seeds, by the handful. And he tells Stanley something that is very important to Mr. Sir. It's almost something of a mantra to him. Mm-hmm. It is something that he uses to ground himself in his reality, and help the boys get acclimated to their circumstances. This is not a Girl Scout camp.
Yes, of course.
Now,
he says this about 50 times in the movie.
No one at any point insinuates that it is.
No.
No one ever is hey, is this a Girl Scout camp?
Right.
No one else in the movie really even talks about girls that much. It's just Mr. Sir, and he's bringing it up every 10 minutes. It's very important to him that other people know that he knows that this is not a Girl Scout camp.
I think Mr. Sir, upon putting all these pieces together, he's adamant about it not being a Girl Scout camp. He's adamant that they call him Mr. Sir, which we then find out is not actually his real name. I wonder what else he's covering up. This sounds like a sort of closeted, sort of queer-coded villain in some way.
Oh boy, does
Am I right?
he?
You know?
There is... we never find out.
Is Holes transphobic?
Whoa!
Fight me.
Yeah, unclear what's going on with Mr. Sir exactly. There are some dynamics among the adults in this story that, again, are not explored in any detail, but there's some weird stuff happening at Camp Green Lake beyond the obvious child abuse angle. But we'll get there. So Mr. Sir tells Stanley, you're not at Girl Scout camp and you're going to be thirsty for the next 18 months because, again, they're in the desert.
And there are no girls.
There are no girls.
You'd be thirsty. Wait. I did.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
Then he takes Stanley on a little bit of a tour of the grounds, and he points out to Stanley as they are looking around that there are no guard towers, there are no fences, there are no guards of any kind, really. Stanley does notice that Mr. Sir is carrying a gun, but Mr. Sir is like, oh, this is not for you.
He literally says, I wouldn't waste a bullet on you.
And the reason that he will do that is not because Mr. Sir cares so very much about child welfare that he wouldn't shoot a child. It's just that there's really no need to, because Camp Green Lake has the only water for 100 miles. And if Stanley tried to make a break for it and run through the desert, he would just die.
Yeah.
So they don't need guards and they don't need fences because the landscape is doing that work for them.
Fair enough.
And then he also tells Stanley the sort of rules of the camp. So there's kind of the one activity that they do here. You can probably guess based on the title of the story what that activity. Yup, they make one big caftan together, all together. It's beautiful. No, they dig holes.
They digging up that hole.
How big are the holes?
5 foot deep, 5 feet diameter. Use your shovel as a measure.
Yep, they have 5-foot-long shovels. The boys are to go out every day and dig one hole. And while he is out in the desert digging up the holes, Stanley will need to be on the lookout for some local wildlife. We have already seen some of the rattlesnakes, for example. We will see some scorpions as well, classic desert creatures. But of course, those aren't really what he will need to worry about. What will Stanley need to worry about most in terms of the wildlife?
Coyotes.
No.
Buzzards.
No.
Armadillos.
No.
Well, then it's got to be them goddamn Gila monsters.
Spencer went down a Gila monster hole last night.
I did. And wouldn't you know it, they are named Gila monster, or whatever the Latin name is. Well, the Gila comes from the Gila River Basin, but their Latin name actually comes from the fact that they have little bone studs on their skin.
Ugh.
Yeah, they have like little pearl-shaped bone studs on the like outside, not on their belly, but on the outside of their skin. And their secondary name comes from the fact that the first person who discovered them thought that they were related to the bearded lizards that are only found in Mexico and maybe Guatemala. But they're sort of cousins. They're not exactly related in the same way. But never fear, the Gila monster is, while venomous, very slow moving, and so as a result, not really a threat to humans. And they're actually a protected species in Arizona, so you should not shoot them, unlike the yellow spotted lizards of Camp Green Lake.
Yes, so the most dangerous animals out here in this desert are yellow spotted lizards, a very real species that I was very afraid of as a child because I definitely thought they were real, much like quicksand. I was like, I'm really going to have to worry about these yellow lizards.
Well, quicksand is real.
That's true.
You just don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. But the great news, everyone, yellow spotted lizards are not real. You don't need to worry about them.
But if they were real, they would have exactly 11 yellow spots.
Yes. And if they bite you, bit you, I remember how tenses work. If they bit you, they would kill you. No, but, we probably don't need to worry about that. That probably won't come up.
No.
Now Stanley gets to meet his counselor, Dr. Pendanski.
Dr. Mom.
Dr. Mom. He is a real swell guy.
And a real doctor.
And you know what? He respects Stanley, okay? Because
that is his first line.
Even though Stanley has definitely done some really bad things, we all know this for a fact, because everybody who ends up in jail is there because they did really bad things, 100%. Right? So Stanley did bad.
Yep.
He can still rebuild his character, and he's going to become a productive member of society, and Dr. Pendanski believes in him. Isn't that nice?
Swell.
So Dr. Pendanski kind of shows Stanley a little bit more around the camp, and he is the person who tells Stanley the number one rule, which is don't upset the warden. We have not seen the warden yet, and we won't for a while. But we do see some of Stanley's bunkmates, who are Rex, Alan, and Theodore.
No.
Sorry.
No.
That
Wrong.
would be X-Ray, Squid, and of course the best name, Armpit.
Correct.
Pendanski doesn't like nicknames, right? He tells the boys, like, I'm going to call you the names that your parents gave you and the names that society is going to recognize you under when you finally turn your life around and stop being such terrible people. And the boys are like, fuck that, and they call him Mom.
Yep. This is a great little scene I'm sure we'll talk about later about the idea of like control and liberation.
Mm-hmm.
I love this whole sub-thread.
Yeah, the boys are carving out little sort of pockets of individuality for themselves and are sort of creating their own little culture despite the counselor's best efforts.
I can dig it.
Speaking of digging and people who are good at it, back in the tent, Stanley meets Magnet, Zigzag, and Zero.
Mm-hmm.
An interesting thing about Zero, even Dr. Pendanski calls him Zero.
Mm-hmm.
And why does Pendanski call him Zero, despite the fact that, as we will learn later, that is not his real name?
Well, you know why they call him Zero, don't you? Because he got zero brains in that little head of his.
Yep. That's a thing Pendanski just says to this little boy's face.
Yeah.
Zero is so small. I don't know how old he's supposed to be, but he's like the tiniest little boy you ever saw.
He's tiny.
So Stanley learns via a tour in Armpit's armpit that if he would like to survive and perhaps make some friends here at camp, he is going to have to use the chosen names of these boys. He tries to call him Theodore, and Armpit doesn't like that. So Stanley is like, okay, great. I have been introduced to the local pecking order. The person in charge is X-Ray. Why is X-Ray in charge?
Is he oldest? I wasn't sure why he was in charge.
X-Ray is in charge because he has been there the longest.
Gotcha.
Yep.
He's the veteran.
Yep. So X-Ray is first in line for water and kind of gets to tell other people to give him food off their tray, and they just sort of do it. Because it's kind of not worth upsetting X-Ray. But here at lunch, you know, these are pretty nice boys. They're bonding with each other at this first meal about what else but what Stanley got arrested for. And here we finally get to learn why exactly the police reacted as strongly to these shoes that Stanley supposedly stole as they did. So these shoes belonged to a famous professional baseball player named Clyde Livingston.
Clyde Sweet Feet Livingston.
Yes, he is one of the fastest people in the majors, apparently. And all of the boys are like, what, did you take them off of his feet? How did you catch him? But no, of course not. The way that these shoes ended up in Stanley's hands is that Clyde Livingston donated them to a homeless shelter as part of an auction that they were doing. And that is important to Clyde Livingston because he was an orphan and he grew up in part in that shelter. And so he is especially upset that someone would steal from a charitable organization that he was trying to support. That is what he thinks Stanley has done.
This part is so buck wild because, one, it makes that scene where the police sort of like bust into the Yelnatz's apartment and like take a crime scene photo of Stanley's bedroom and they like specifically take a picture of this poster of Clyde Sweetfeet, and then the cop is just like, we got him, you know. It's like, oh,
case closed.
Okay, but then like Stanley wakes up from this nightmare where Clyde looks directly into the camera and says, anyone who would steal from orphans is no fan of mine. Which is just like, damn, dude. Like, I remember at that point in the movie, I was like, man, I really hope that Clyde finds out he didn't actually steal the shoes. It was all just a family curse and big misunderstanding. This sucks.
Yeah, it's very, it is a pretty upsetting thing, again, to like look a child in the eyes when the only piece of evidence is like, at some point he had the shoes in his hand. At some point after they were stolen. And that's all the evidence you have to look at that little boy and be like, you're no fan of mine. Take down that poster. I hate you personally.
Orphan thief.
And at this point in the conversation, as Stanley is explaining this, Zero pipes up and asks if the shoes had X's on the back of them.
Red X's.
Red X's, which they did.
They did.
But that's not what the other boys at the table find notable. Why are the rest of the boys so surprised when Zero says this?
Oh, because this is the line that made you LOL, because this is the first time they've heard him talk, I think.
Yeah, they have never
Damn, Zero, what else can you do?
Yeah, that's my favorite line. When Zero pipes up, they're all like, Zero's never spoken before. And that is when Armpit is like, damn, Zero, what else can you do? Like this, wow, look at that. We didn't know he could do that.
Well, because again, stereotype of like possibly deaf mute and also just like dumb as a box of rocks, according to Dr. Pendasshole or whatever.
Yeah.
It's wild to me. But. Yeah,
the rhetoric around Zero is that he is stupid and loves digging holes.
Loves it.
But now it's time for a flashback.
Okay.
So now that we have learned why Stanley got arrested, it's time to put some of his bad luck in context. Because Stanley IV is not the first person in his family to run into a spot of trouble in the Texas desert. He's not even the first Stanley. In fact, Stanley I is the first one to run into some trouble in the Texas desert. He made a fortune in the stock market, but as he was traveling through Texas, his stagecoach was robbed by the famous outlaw Kissin' Kate Barlow.
Wow.
And here's my question for you, Spencer. Did she kiss Stanley I?
No, Kelcee.
Of course not.
If she kissed him, she would have killed him. And then there would be no Stanley Yelnats the second, the third, or the fourth, because they'd all be dead before they could be born.
Yes. Everything that Stanley IV's mom says in this movie is fucking hilarious. But this is the part where she's like, if she'd have kissed him, she'd have killed him, and you'd have never been born.
That probably rivals my other favorite line of this actress, which is, that is not my Edgar. That's all I kept thinking was like, oh, that's the woman from Men in Black. I know
she's
Edgar.
So good.
That's not my Edgar.
Smell anything. She's so good. But anyway, yes. So Kissin' Kate Barlow just robbed Stanley I and took all his money away, and she left him alone in the desert for 16 days with no food or water. And somehow he survived. Anyway, that's probably not relevant.
No, probably not.
All right. So anyway, that's just kind of a fun anecdote about Stanley's past that I'm sure will have no bearing on our current situation. So back in the present, Stanley is getting up at 4:30 in the morning for his first full day of camp.
Digging up that hole.
Yes, they start their day at the library. What's the library full of?
Wait, what? The Library of Shovels?
Yeah, that's what it's labeled.
The library?
Yeah.
I missed that.
It's just the closet full of shovels.
That's
it's called
really
the library.
funny.
Stanley grabs a shovel, which X-Ray then comes and immediately takes away from him. Mm-hmm. And why does he do that?
That's X-Ray's shovel. It's shorter than all the rest. Shorter shovel means less digging.
Not by much, to be fair. It's like a half an inch shorter or something like that, but X-Ray's in charge. Gotta let him have his shovel. And when they go out to the dig site, Mr. Sir tells Stanley that if he finds anything interesting while he's digging, he should come and let either Mr. Sir or Dr. Pendansky know, because if the warden likes what he finds, he'll get the day off. Mm-hmm. And Stanley's like, okay, what am I looking for? Mr. Sir is like, you're not looking for anything. Because what is the Camp Green Lake motto?
This is not a Girl Scout camp. You're so here close. To build character, not sell cookies.
Correct. Yeah, more or less. Yes. The motto of Camp Green Lake is if you take a bad boy and make him dig a bunch of holes, it'll turn him into a good boy. So Stanley's not looking for anything. He's out here to become a good boy. Which is good for Stanley because he's a slow digger, and he's digging too close to the other boys, and they're all like throwing their dirt out of their holes into his holes, and it's like, Stanley, you probably could have figured out that you needed to be further away from them, but okay, whatever. He's just kind of having a rough time. But really, if you think about it, even that is not Stanley IV's fault. It is the fault of his no good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather.
Can we just, if we're about to get to the backstory of this guy,
we sure are.
He didn't really steal a pig, did he?
I mean, kind of. It depends on how you think of stealing.
Okay.
But yes, this great-great-grandfather is named Elia Yelnats, and he lived back in the old country. He lived in Latvia, where he works on a farm of a man named Morris Menke, and he falls in love with Morris's daughter Myra, despite the fact that, boy, if there is a character who legitimately has nothing going on up there, it is Myra.
Poor Myra.
But Elia loves her anyway, because he's shallow, I guess. And so he goes to the local fortune teller named Madame Zeroni, because you know how every Latvian village just has an Ethiopian fortune teller in it. And he's like, Madame Zeroni, what should I do? And she's like, forget about this stupid girl and go to America, like my son.
Yeah.
That's where your real future and your opportunities lie. But Elia's like, I don't want to forget about Myra. She's hot and dumb, and that's good for me. And so he goes to Morris, and he's like, I would like to marry your daughter. And Morris is like, that's interesting, but this other guy also asked to marry my daughter, and he offered me a big fat pig. And I would really like to have a very big pig.
Yes. Wouldn't we all? The dream.
Whomst among us. And he's like, well, what do you have to offer? And Elia's like, a heart full of love. And Morris is like, I would rather have the pig.
Knee slap, guffaw, guffaw.
Men's laughter. And so Elia's like, ugh. And he goes back to Madame Zeroni. He's like, ugh, he wants a pig. What do I do? And Madame Zeroni is like, okay, fine. If it's that important to you, you can take one of my pigs.
Not stealing.
Not stealing. No, not yet.
All right.
She's like, you take my smallest pig, and every day you're going to carry it up the mountain, up to the stream at the top of the mountain, and you're going to let the pig drink. And you're going to do this every day, and you're going to get stronger, and the pig is going to get stronger.
And when the pig drinks, you have to sing it this nonsense song about woodpeckers and some bullshit.
Yes, you have to sing it a lullaby.
Why? What the fuck with this song?
Magic.
Yeah, but okay.
She's a fortune teller. It's just magic.
I was just trying to figure out what this song was about. It just bothered me.
It's about woodpeckers singing. Okay. So I don't know, man.
If you know the Deep Holes lore about the significance of the woodpecker song.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful song. And once the pig gets big enough that Elia can give it to Morris, he needs to carry Madame Zeroni up the mountain so she can drink from the spring and she can get strong as well. But be careful. If you forget that last part,
I'll curse you and your family forever.
For all eternity. Ha 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 ha.
And they both have a nice laugh because how silly it would be.
Why would he forget?
Why would he forget? And surely she's joking, carry Madame Zeroni up the mountain and have her drink from the stream while he sings the song. Silly. That's just a funny joke that this Romani Ethiopian woman has done told. And
you know how fortune tellers are always telling jokes.
They kid. They joke. They kid.
Yeah, she's a comedian. And so Elia does this. He carries the pig up the mountain every day, and the pig gets bigger, and he brings it to Morris. And as it just so happens, both of the pigs are the exact same size.
Magic.
So Morris is a very progressive man. Sure. So he's like, these two pigs are the same size. Myra, you get to pick. Which of these two men would you rather marry? And it bears noting that Elia is like young and hot, and the other guy is old and not as hot. So you're clearly supposed to be like, well, obviously she's going to pick Elia because he's young and hot. But Myra, I mean, guess good for her is like, oh, how could I possibly choose between these two exactly equivalent men?
I've never chosen a thing in my entire life.
I've never gotten to choose anything before. I don't know how. And so she's like, I'll think of a number between 1 and 10. And whoever gets closest is the one that I will marry. And Elia's like, you know what? Forget this, actually. If me being in love with you and raising this giant pig is not enough to convince you, then nothing will be, and I have enough pride that I'm not going to stand here and humiliate myself. Marry him, keep the pig as a wedding present, and then he storms off and immediately gets on a ship for America, and he sails away.
I like that he rips up the bouquet, too. What a funny thing to think of. I rip these flowers.
Yeah, you don't even get to keep nice flowers. I'm so mad at you. She does get to keep the pig, though.
Yeah.
That's the thieving part. I think the idea is that, like, if it doesn't work, you give the pig back to Madame Zeroni.
I don't know, man.
You took her pig.
The pig was gifted. He's a dirty, rotten contract breaker, but he didn't really steal a pig. I take issue. Now, see, yet another Yelnats that needs a good lawyer.
Yeah. Yeah.
He did not commit the crime you accused him of. That's
true. He did void his contract, though, and he should have had a lawyer there with his negotiations with Madame Zeroni to look over that and be like, I
just think we can resolve this in arbitration.
I think we probably could. But he left for America, so he wasn't in the same... You can't arbitrate if you're not with each other. No. Anyway.
He forgot and then realized, waking from a nightmare on a ship, that he didn't carry Madame Zeroni and sing her the woodpecker song while she sips from the stream.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Yep,
I
bummer.
bet maybe he can turn that boat around.
Probably not.
Probably not.
No, this is unfortunately not a story where boats get turned around efficiently either.
Foreshadowing.
So back at camp, Zero has finished his hole first because he's very fast, and Stanley finishes his hole last because he's very slow, and he has to walk...
And because the first hole is always the hardest.
Yep, until you get to the second one. That's actually a running bit in the book, is like, the first one is the hardest. No, just kidding. Actually, the second one is the hardest. No, actually, I think the third one is the hardest. And they just keep moving that goalpost on poor Stanley. But anyway, so Stanley is walking back to camp all by himself, and he is like heading for the showers where they only get like a minute's worth of water to shower with every day. And when he's outside the showers, Mr. Sir shows up and pulls a gun on him. Oh, shit.
Yeah.
He said he wasn't gonna do that.
Yet another point where I'm like, this is not a movie for children.
Yeah, but actually Mr. Stir is standing by his principles. He has not pulled his gun on Stanley. What has he pulled his gun on?
A dang old Gila monster.
A dang old 2003 CGI lizard, which is, to be fair, pretty frightening to look at.
Terrifying. Straight out of Digimon.
So Stanley almost had a close encounter, but fortunately Mr. Sir does kill it, and Stanley like runs back to his bunk, and then Mr. Sir is just out doing the strangest like side shuffle around this courtyard with his gun out looking for lizards to shoot.
It's one of the best scenes. Like, if I knew how to make GIFs and or GIFs, I would GIF that. Just him, just like...
Jon Voight is having the best time
really
in this
good.
movie. The
really
way
good.
he moves his body is so weird.
It's very funny.
He's not just... It's so strange, the way that he is moving. So Stanley sits down to write a letter to his mother in which he, for whatever reason, decides to be complicit in the sort of lies of the court system and is like, yeah, we're having a great time here out on the lake, and, you know, I passed the swimming test, and now we're going to do jet skis, and I'm making friends with all the other boys. We're having a great time, Mom. Don't even worry. And of course,
it's a very heartbreaking scene.
It's very sad. That actually is a thing that we don't get a ton of in the movie that we get more of in the book, which is that Stanley is, like, very protective of his parents. Mm-hmm. He doesn't want them to know how profoundly he is suffering, which is very sweet, but also kind of misguided, because it's like, you need to get the state involved. Like, somebody needs to shut this down. But he doesn't know that. Why would the court send him to a place that's illegal and shouldn't be operating? He doesn't know. And the other boys kind of see him writing this letter and all bully him for it. And they're like, no, you're writing to your mommy. Which is one of those things where you're like, these boys are being mean, until you think about any of their circumstances for any amount of time. And at one point, one of the boys named Squid takes the letter out of his hand, and he's like, if your parents cared about you, you wouldn't be here. I wonder where this child learned a sentiment like that. Ugh. How could he possibly have even thought to say a thing like that to another person? Weird.
And this is when I'm extremely glad that this is just a work of fiction. And
no place like this could exist in real life.
No.
So out in the holes the next day, Stanley finds himself a fossil of a fish.
Well, that's got to be something interesting.
That's pretty interesting.
A fossil?
Yeah, he shows it to I don't know, Pendanski, Mr. Sir, somebody, and they're like, the warden doesn't care about fossils. Yeah. But all the other boys kind of do. They're all like genuinely like, oh, that's kind of cool. Look, it's a little fish. So this tells us a couple of things. First of all, is going to start to hint at the nickname that Stanley will finally earn for himself. It'll be another couple of scenes before we hear from it, but Armpit says something along the lines of like, it looks like one of them cave drawings. And we also learn, due to the presence of fish, that there must have actually been a lake here once. And in fact, there used to be a town, as Dr. Pendanski points out, a town which the warden's grandfather once owned.
Wow.
And now, are you ready? It's time for another flashback. So here we go back in time to the halcyon days of 1880 in Texas. You know, the best time. And we see a charming little town called Green Lake, and it's charming Green Lake.
Wow.
That exists. And look, it's Dooley Hill. He's back.
Oh, no.
Dooley Hill's an onion salesman. Specifically an onion salesman, not other vegetables. Only onions.
Dooley Hill, look out! It's Texas.
You gotta get out of here.
Get out!
He's having a great time. He's selling his onions. He's got onion tonics and onion chutneys and onion juices and this onion juice will cure whatever ails you. Even the lizards don't like it.
Take your hat off there, Mr. Walker. That's what I thought. You put some of this onion tonic on his head, and he'll have a mane as thick as old Mary Lou's. She's been eating nothing but onions for 100 years. This is my magical mule, and I'm Dooley Hill, and I gotta go. Oh no, a white woman. I'm dead.
I gotta run. No, he doesn't run. He sees a pretty blonde woman, and she comes right up to him, and she's like, "You're a donkey cat. How do you know your donkey's 100 years old? You're only 25." And he's like, "That's fine for you to be flirting with me." And so
this is when it turned into a horror movie, and I was like, "You gotta go!
Get out of there, Dooley Hill!" No, he's having a nice time. He's got a pretty teacher, and she's there, and she's like, "I'll give you some of my peaches in exchange for some of your onions."
Don't you look at her peaches. A man with a gold tooth is right behind you.
No, he doesn't know. The peaches are Miss Catherine's specialty. But unfortunately, as Spencer has pointed out, there are some rich-looking white guys standing at a distance, and they're like, "I like Miss Catherine's peaches." Gross.
Thugs.
Yeah, no, their introduction is that they're saying extremely gross sexist shit about Catherine. Back in the present, X-Ray shows up to have a little heart-to-heart with Stanley, because it seems like Stanley is maybe not still fully acclimated to the sort of rules, right? So Stanley found this thing that he thought was interesting and he thought might get him a day off of work, and he just went and took it to Dr. Pendansky, and he didn't even show it to X-Ray first. And that's kind of like not how things go.
Right.
Because the X-Ray has been here the longest.
Right.
And so if anybody deserves a day off, I mean, it's only fair that it would be X-Ray.
That's me.
Yeah. So in the future, I'm not gonna make a big deal about it, but like in the future, if you find something interesting, you give it to X-Ray.
Sure.
X-Ray is not trying to like physically threaten Stanley. He's just saying, you're a person who like understands fairness, right? And we're already sort of in an unfair situation and trying to make the best of it. I've been in that situation longer than you have. Let's you and I make things easier for each other, Stanley. I will make things easier for you if you work with me. That's the kind of deal-making X-Ray is doing.
Diplomacy.
Yeah. And we see Stanley's agreement to that idea kind of pay him back when he is in the rec hall later and does something to a guy who is credited just as Lump. He like trips over him or stumbles into him or something. His kid's just sitting in the chair and he gets mad at him. And he's like, "What, do you want to fucking fight, bro?"
Yeah.
And Stanley's like, "No, not really."
Stanley freaking Eugene's it from Hey Arnold, knocks over a radio, hits the TV, and then crashes into Lump. All in one sort of deft banana peel slit.
There are some moments of slapstick in this movie because, it's a Disney movie from 2003. And then this is one of them. But the other boys, they stand up for him. We see like Lump get up and try to like lunge at Stanley and fight him. And all these boys start grabbing like pool cues and like they're getting up in his face. And Zero just straight up grabs a pool ball off the table and is like about to like throw it at this kid's head.
Dude,
that's so ominous.
That was a real ass scene because all the boys were breaking it up. Like, D-Tent shows up and is like, "Oh no, it's cool. He didn't mean anything. He's just a doofus." But then quietly, menacingly in the background, Zero pick up pool ball.
Yeah,
and he's just gonna brain somebody.
Yeah, he's just gonna beat someone with a pool ball
and say nothing.
Yeah.
God, I love Zero.
It's a little creepy. But the other boys manage to break everything up before it gets to that. And this is where we hear X-Ray and Armpit start saying things like, "You can't mess with Caveman. Caveman's one of ours." And so he has gotten his nickname. He is called Caveman.
One of the boys.
And now X-Ray is like, "You get to move up one in the water line."
Wow.
Yeah, he's moving up in the world. This does unfortunately mean that Zero gets pushed back because Zero is sort of the next newest person. But I guess, they don't like Zero as much as they like Caveman, unfortunately.
Them's the breaks, I guess. I love this part in the movie, though, because Stanley goes from like, "Oh, golly gee willikers, I'm Stanley Yelnats," to like, "Yeah, that's cool, Mom." Like, he's just like instantly like part of the crew now, is like much more relaxed. It's good.
And they're having a good old time doing their group therapy with Dr. Pendansky, who is trying to get them to think about, what they might like to do when they're out of Camp Green Lake and how they're going to become productive members of society. And he notices that Stanley has kind of got this attitude on him now that he's got himself a nickname. And he's like, now, Stanley, you think you're hot shit now because you got a nickname and you're part of the group, but like you need to learn how to take some accountability for yourself. Whose fault is it that you're here?
My freaking pig-stealing, cursed, no-good, stinky great-grandfather.
His no good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather. No, Dr. Pendanski says, no, the only person to blame for your current situation is you, which is factually incorrect. But he's like, no, Stanley, you need to work on improving yourself. No one is worthless, not even Zero. Again, just a thing he says.
What a prick.
And he's like, right, Zero? What do you like to do, Zero? And the other boys are like, don't even try it. Zero only talks to caveman. But this time Zero does speak, and he's like, I like digging holes.
Boom, got him.
So Stanley's mom has written him a letter back about his father's ongoing struggles to make shoes smell good. It's not going well. He's just sort of like, he's just got like a big pot of water on the stove and he's just like boiling sneakers.
Mm-hmm.
With various, like, tinctures.
Yeah, boiling.
That just cannot be the best way to go about doing it. Yeah, so Stanley's mom is writing him this letter, and she's like, I feel bad for the little old lady who lived in a shoe. It must have smelled real bad. And Stanley's like, ha.
Oh, Mom.
Good one.
That's freaking hilarious. I just love your sense of humor, Mom.
You're so fucking funny, Mom.
So funny.
God. And Zero walks by and is like, what are you laughing about? And he's like, oh, my mom. So this joke about the little old lady who lives in the shoe. And Zero's just staring at him. He's like the nursery rhyme. And Zero's like, I don't know any nursery rhymes.
I have zero literacies.
I don't know what you're talking about. And Stanley is like, okay, well, that's fine. Could you please stop, like, reading over my shoulder, though? You're making me kind of uncomfortable. And what does Zero say to that?
I don't know how to read.
It's very sad.
I don't know how to read, and no one has ever told me a story.
So he asks Stanley if he'll teach him to read, but Stanley's like, I don't really know how to teach, and, like, I'm tired from digging holes all day, so, like, sorry, but no. And then Zero is just, like, sitting in his bunk, staring off into space while sad music plays, and the other boys are, like, having a good time outside, and Zero's just sitting by himself, and it's very sad.
Yep. It sucks. It sucks.
Out in the holes, things start to get interesting because Stanley finds something else.
A grenade?
No.
Oh.
That'd be wild, though. I found a World War II landmine.
Whoa.
Wow. No, Stanley has found something that looks kind of like a long bullet made of gold, and it's got initials or something carved into it, and all of the boys are looking at it, and they're like, it can't be a shotgun shell. It's too long to be a shotgun shell. What kind of bullet is it? Because they're boys, you see.
Yeah.
And they think things can only be bullets. This is a theme.
got KB on it. That's Kyle Bronson. He was in my 5th grade class.
Fucking zigzag. So, oh, yeah, I bet that's Kevin Baker. Who's Kevin Baker? He was in my math class. Yeah, Zigzag. I'm pretty sure this is from the kid from your math class.
That's
it. You got it.
Solve the mystery.
But as the hierarchy demands, Stanley gives this bullet-looking thing to X-Ray and is like, you can tell him you found it in your hole. And X-Ray's like, cool, maybe I'll get the rest of the day off. And Stanley's like, no. You're already basically finished with your hole for today. Wait until tomorrow and give it to them in the morning so you actually get a full day off. And X-Ray's like, this is why you're a real one, caveman. And so he's earned even more brownie points. And so X-Ray waits till the next day and like gets a little bit into the morning of digging before being like, oh look, Mr. Sure, Mr. Pendanski, or whoever, I found the thing. And wouldn't you know it, the warden does find this interesting. Oh boy.
She knows Kevin Baker.
No,
that's not what happens.
It's not. Could you describe the warden for me, please?
Sure. You know that joke where it's like, the doctor had to operate on their own child. How could this be?
Yeah, the father and son are in a car accident, and the father dies, and the boys rush to the hospital, and the doctor says, I can't operate on this boy. He's my son.
Huh?
Why?
Because we believe in marriage equality, and this son has 2 dads.
My 2 dads.
My gay surgeon father.
No, it's because the doctor is Sigourney Weaver.
Famously a woman.
A woman.
Wow.
Unthinkable.
And this doctor,
the warden of this boys' camp that's not a Girl Scout camp has been a girl this whole time?
It was a real mind flip. I mean,
what?
It definitely made me pause the DVD, take it out of the PlayStation, sit and meditate on my own sexism for a solid 30 minutes. I mean, I got.
It's true. He made me sit there and watch him do that.
Yeah, and I said, no, Kelcee, this is my penance, and you need to
you need to witness me.
Yeah, to watch me become.
He begged me to absolve him of his sins.
Because I have to be a better man. Watch holes with Sigourney Weaver. Gotta try to be a better man.
Yeah, so Sigourney Weaver is the warden, and the thing you gotta know about her is that this is the best she has ever looked.
She looked really hot.
She's so hot in this movie for no reason.
Anyway.
Sigourney Weaver is so hot in this movie.
Unreasonably hot.
Unreasonably hot.
Like, it made me wonder what deleted scenes there were, because I was like, she's hot for reasons that they don't want us to know.
I think it's just because they were like, what's Sigourney Weaver look like? That? Fantastic. Put her in a cowboy hat. Oh. And a sports bra for no reason.
That's unbelievable.
Yes, it's fantastic. And she shows up and she is very excited to see this weird bullet thing.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, all right, X-Ray, you get the day off. And everybody else, we're going to dig in this area where X-Ray, again, he has told them that he found it today, not yesterday. So we're going to start digging in this area and see if we can't find anything else. Which, of course, Stanley is like, that's not where we found it, so you're not going to find anything there, but he's not going to say anything about that. Well, and the warden sure is looking, because she is calling all of the boys by their nicknames, despite the fact that this is the first time that we have seen her, and it's certainly the first time Stanley has ever seen her.
Yeah.
So why does she know that he is called Caveman?
Because she put cameras in the showers. And everywhere else.
And everywhere else. Yes. So the warden has this whole camp on surveillance, which is fine.
Yeah, totally fine. Totally fine. I mean, 13-year-olds don't have rights, so...
Yeah. No, why would they?
They're her children now.
Yeah.
Her holes, her children.
And that's fine, because she's a good, nice woman. You know who else is a real nice woman?
Kissing Kate Barlow?
No, but Catherine Barlow's a nice lady.
Oh.
And see, here's the story. Let me tell you the story. See, it used to rain in Camp Green Lake. Actually, before it was Camp Green Lake. Back when it was just Green Lake, it used to rain all the time.
Back when she had them sweet peaches?
Yeah.
And Dule Hill had them sweet onions? They got some sweet, sweet rain?
That very time.
Wow.
And when it would rain in Green Lake, the roof in Miss Catherine's schoolhouse would leak.
Oh, gosh darn it.
That's just terrible.
Not on the books.
All over the books, all over the desks, all over the floors. And gosh, Miss Catherine's just beside herself about it.
Was her library filled with shovels or books?
She had books.
She had real books? Okay.
She's the only person other than Stanley who knows how to read. And wouldn't you know it, Sam, when he's not selling his onions, he's pretty good with his hands. And he says, oh, your roof is leaking. I can fix that.
I can fix that.
And so he says he'll fix up her roof in exchange for some jars of her spiced peaches.
Some of them spiced peaches. I tell you what.
Oh, Lord.
I'll fix that little drip of yours for some spiced peaches.
Disgusting.
I didn't write it.
No.
I didn't write it.
Disgusting. How dare you? Go in time out. Go and meditate some more.
All right, hold on. I gotta
He's got to go meditate on his sexism again. All right. He's legitimately taking his headphones off. We're going to have to stop for 30 minutes. God damn it.
Okay, so I'm back, and I'm thoroughly, I've become a better man.
Oh, my God. So once Sam fixes up the roof, Miss Catherine's like, you know what else? These windows don't open. And me and the children, we might appreciate a breeze while we're in the schoolhouse. And he's like, all right, I can fix that.
It's just so sweltering in here. I'm getting the vapors.
You just got out of timeout. Do not make me put you back in.
I'm fine. I'm just saying what the movie said.
This scene is buck wild because Sam is like out there. He's got the window open while he's fixing it. And Miss Catherine is sitting in the classroom with one child right next to this window reading
Edgar Allan Poe's Annabelle Lee.
In like a way that you would not read that poem to a child. I'm sorry.
No.
And so she is like, and I loved Miss Annabelle Lee so much. Her body was fantastic or whatever.
That's exactly how it goes. Yeah. She was such a sex maiden by the sea, and I had to lay her down and slurp them peaches.
I think we both have to go in time out
Damn it. Shit. God damn it. Okay, all right.
We're never going to get through this.
No.
But the moral of the story is she pauses and then Sam starts reciting the rest of the poem because he knows poetry because he's smart and he's cute and he's sweet and he can fix things and he's great.
Because you can't find a better Sam.
And after he fixes the window, she's like, that the door doesn't hang straight either. I can't even get it closed. And he's like, I can fix that. What he can't fix is...
structural racism?
Well, that, and he can't fix the gross dudes who come to Miss Catherine's night classes to just, harass her and brag about how their daddy owns the lake. See, this is where we learn that Trout Walker's daddy owns the lake.
His name is Trout Walker. I forgot how funny that is to me. Trout Walker.
The funniest part is, okay, here's a difference from the book. In the book, they're like, his name is actually Charles Walker, but everybody calls him Trout Walker because his feet... smell like dead fish.
No.
He also has bad feet.
It's layers. A theme. Like an onion.
Yeah. But in the movie, they just call him Trout Walker, which is very funny. And Trout Walker, he's the rich boy who was talking about her peaches earlier and how now don't you feel bad? Because now you sound like Trout Walker, and isn't that terrible? He is rich, and he has decided that Miss Catherine ought to marry him, but first she ought to come out with him on his boat. He got a new, motorized boat. It's not a motor, it's like a
You just don't even need to paddle it.
You don't even need to paddle it.
Ain't got no paddles.
And she
just walks around like a trout.
Yeah, he's got a fancy boat. And he's like, you better come out on the lake with me. And she's like, no, thank you. And he's like, nobody says no to Trout Walker. And she's like, I believe I just did.
Boom, got him.
Now, at this point, Sam has kind of run out of things to fix in the schoolhouse. So he's like, I'll see you around, Miss Catherine. And he was rowing out on his boat to the other side of the lake where he gets all of his onions from. And Miss Catherine is just so sad that he's gone for all of 15 minutes that she's sitting by herself just sobbing in her classroom. But then Sam walks back in and he's like, oh, you're crying. I can fix that with smooches.
Smooch.
Aw, yeah.
Give me them peaches.
Unfortunately, Trout Walker has done seen them kissing through the window, and that's not a good thing.
No.
You really don't want Trout Walker to see you at all. You don't want Trout Walker to know you exist, but you don't want to... I guess if you don't know who Dule Hill is, then maybe you don't understand. I just realized we have not clarified yet that Sam is black. That's pretty important.
Yeah.
And we did say Miss Catherine was white, so maybe that was implied. But anyway, that's the dynamic here. And the bad thing that you think is going to happen does happen. So they form themselves an angry mob, and they start by burning down the schoolhouse. And she runs down to the sheriff, who is just drunk as hell in his office. And she's like, excuse me, they are burning down the schoolhouse. You're the sheriff. Can you go and do something about it? And he's like, why don't you give me a kiss?
Give me some of them peaches.
She's like, no, I've come to report a crime. And he's like, well, you kissed Sam while you won't kiss me. And she's like, fuck you, dude, you're drunk. And
I always get drunk before hanging. They say hanging, they mean lynching. They're going to publicly execute.
She's like, oh, you say you're going to hang Sam. Well, then you better hang me too because I kissed him back. And he's like, well, it's not against the law for you to kiss him. It's only against the law for him to kiss you.
Strange bit of dialogue. Probably true. Weird way to say it. But also just doesn't matter.
But again, that's there for the audience to be like, that's the thing that's on the books in Texas at that time. And so he then tries to grab her and sexually assaults her. And then she shoves him off and runs away and tries to get to Sam in time. He is trying to row his boat across the lake to get away.
But like John Henry, he can't keep up with the Industrial Revolution of a boat that doesn't need to be paddled.
Yes, so Trout Walker's boat is faster than his, and so he catches up to him and does shoot Sam to death on the lake. And so
did we mention that he killed Mary Lou?
He also kills Mary Lou.
Is slaughtered. The wagon is on fire. No more magical onions.
Nope.
This town sucks.
Yeah,
it deserves everything bad.
Yeah, the town sucks, and Miss Catherine decides that maybe she's not going to be nice anymore. So Miss Catherine shows up to the jail the next day in her Sunday best, and she's like, excuse me, Sheriff, do you still want that kiss? And he's like, yeah. And so she pulls out a gun and shoots him to death.
Yeah.
And then she puts on her lipstick and kisses him. And then she steals a horse and rides away. And this is when she becomes...
Kissing Kate Barlow.
Anyway, back in the modern times, the boys have turned X-Ray's hole into like a full-scale archaeological dig, and they are trying desperately to find more stuff in this area, but they're not finding anything, and the warden is getting sort of more and more pissed off at them, and eventually they're just like, forget it, we're going back to digging individual holes, and Magnet, why is Magnet called Magnet as it happens?
Because his hands are like freaking magnets, dude.
The reason that Magnet is here is because he stole a puppy.
He's
and he
an
would have
animal
gotten away with it
activist.
if his pocket hadn't started barking.
He is a freaking liberator.
Yeah. So Magnet, who steals Mr. Bag, Mr.
Sir.
Mr. Sir's bag of sunflower seeds, and they're kind of tossing it from boy to boy in the holes, and, you know, Mr. Sir is driven away in the truck, and he turns around and he's driving back, and they're like, oh no, and they throw the bag to Stanley, who of course drops it on the ground, and spills the sunflower seeds in his hole, and he's got the bag in his hands now, and Mr. Sir is coming back, he's like, oh no, he's trying to cover it up with dirt, but Mr. Sir comes back, he sees that Stanley has that bag in his hole, and he's like, how'd that get in there? And Stanley is like, I stole it, sir, because once again, Stanley, one of the boys, not a snitch. And Mr. Sir is like, I'm going to take you back to see the warden, and makes a very grave error when he goes to speak to the warden. But Mr. Sir knocks at the door. He's like, well, Caveman found something. So, of course, the warden is like, oh, great, come in. And then he reveals that Stanley stole his sunflower seeds. And the warden is like, oh, hey, Stanley, could you go and get my little case off of the table in there, the one that has my nail polish in it? And Stanley is like, sure. He goes in, he's like picking the thing up, and he notices up on the walls, Warden has a bunch of old-timey posters of none other but Kissing Kate Barlow. Whoa. Up on her bedroom walls.
Winky-dink.
Interesting. And he sees like, oh, she's got all these makeup cases sitting out on her little vanity thing. And so he grabs the one that has the nail polish in it, brings it back to her, and she's like, this is my special nail polish. You see, I made it myself. And it's infused with rattlesnake venom. And it's harmless when it's dry, of course. But when it's wet, that's a different story.
Right.
And so she starts painting on a fresh coat, and Stanley's standing there like, oh, fuck, this woman's about to kill me. Oh, no. And in the background of this whole scene, Mr. Sir is like, you know, we've got to show these boys some tough love. We got to have some consequences around here. You see, that's what I believe, and I believe that people should face consequences for their actions. I'm a big, strong man.
Listener, you can't see it, but Kelcee is gesticulating as if she is a big, strong John Voight.
I'm man-spreading to the extent that our very small closet allows.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, that's so interesting, Mr. Sir. Get over here. And she claws Mr. Sir in the face.
Slaps
with rattlesnake venom.
The freaking taste out to his mouth.
Out his whole cheek.
His
whole
cheek.
face.
Yeah. And it looks like a slap until John Voight does like 7 somersaults through the floor.
Again, fantastic physical acting from John Voight.
And the whole time I was like, okay, you put nail polish on and then you slapped him. But then later, no.
She claws him. She scratches his face with her wet rattlesnake fingernails.
And it's 2 perfect claw marks, almost as if a freaking snake bite him.
Beautiful. And then she's like, all right, Stanley, you can go back now. And so Stanley's like, okay, I'm getting the fuck out of here. He goes back out to the holes, and the boys are all like, what did she do to you? What did she do to you? And he was like, nothing. They're like, nothing. He's like, nothing. Gets back to his hole, only to find that his hole has already been dug.
It's done been dug
already. Who dug his hole?
The Gila monsters.
No.
Zero. Our favorite little boy.
And why does Zero say that he dug Stanley's hole for him?
Because you didn't steal those sunflowers.
You didn't steal those sunflower seeds. And then Zero says something else interesting that we don't really parse until much later in the story. What else does he say Stanley didn't steal?
And you didn't steal those shoes either.
Huh. Interesting. Stanley doesn't ask him any questions about that at this time. So Zero is basically like, you took the fall for something that wasn't your fault. You shouldn't have to dig this hole. And so Stanley is like, that's interesting. You know what? You're all right, Zero. I think I'll teach you how to read after all.
There you go.
Later in the cafeteria, Mr. Sir assaults a child for asking what happened to his face. Dr. Pendansky then sort of makes the subtext text where he says, I think we've all learned a valuable lesson. We're all people, and Mr. Sir is a very sensitive man.
What happened to my face? Nothing. Nothing happened to my face. In fact, I think it looks right pretty.
I think I look kind of pretty, don't you? Yes, Mr. Star, you look very pretty. Not so pretty is that he starts denying Stanley water, which could kill him pretty easily. It's okay, Zero shares his water with him, and so in reciprocation, Stanley shares that he has a new theory about that little tube, thanks to his little sojourn in the warden's cabin where he saw all of her makeup on her vanity. He's like, I think it was fucking lipstick.
Whoa.
And I think the initials, which, what were the initials?
Kevin Baker.
Kevin Bacon. He's here. Just like the movie Tremors is happening in the background of this one.
That's why all the holes are really there.
Yeah. The fucking, what do they call the worms in Dune? It's like the Shai Halud or something. I was going to say Gom Jabbar, but that's just the needle. Anyway.
Do not fear the Gom Jabbar.
There's so many movies happening in the background of this movie. But anyway, no.
There's only one desert.
He thinks the lipstick may have belonged to Kate Barlow.
Kissing Kate Barlow.
Because, Miss Catherine, after she became an outlaw, she only kissed the men she killed, and so she had to have lipstick around because that was her calling card. And it's fucking awesome, full stop.
It's pretty cool.
Really cool. Really great for, it's not. She's very, very sad the whole time that's happening. But,
Excellent.
She looks
femme
great.
fatale.
And Zero is also like, hey, how about in exchange for you giving me reading lessons, I dig part of your holes for you? Because Zero digs very quickly and Stanley doesn't.
Well, and it does make sort of logical sense, too. It's not really charity. It's like, no, that way we finish at the same time, and then there's more time for reading.
They've negotiated. There is a sense of there being sort of a fair trade. The other boys...
Call it slavery.
They sure do, because this is another place where we maybe should have specified that Stanley is white and Zero is black. Because it turns out he is related to one of the other black characters that we've already seen in this movie. Who is Zero related to?
Zero? You mean Hector Zeroni?
Zeroni?
He's related to Dule Hill?
No.
Oh.
He's related to Madame Zeroni.
Madame Zeroni!
They're connected in that way. Although I don't think Stanley recognizes the name Zeroni because when Zero's like, my name is Hector Zeroni, he's like, oh, okay, cool. Nice to meet you, Hector.
Sweet.
It's like not even, he doesn't react. You also didn't react while we were watching the movie. And so I was like, wow, is that just not the reveal that I thought it was? But it turns out you had just forgotten Madame Zeroni's name.
This movie's really good at providing a number of strange asides and flashbacks that all do fit together. But in the moment, I was probably reading about Gila monsters or whatever.
Probably just not paying attention. We also learn in this conversation that Zero can do complex mathematics in his head, and that he is not stupid. He just doesn't like answering stupid questions. And he inherently only gets stupid questions because everyone thinks he is stupid. And so he just doesn't like to talk to people. Zero and Caveman kind of keep bonding. Zero gives us a little bit of his backstory. Here in this scene, Zero's like, I wasn't always homeless. My mom and I we used to live in places, and then we had to move around a lot, and then she started going away for long periods of time and not coming back. And then one time she just left me in a park, and I just had to sit there waiting for her for a very long time. And it turns out he and Stanley used to go to the same park. And Stanley was like, oh yeah, I used to play in that park all the time. And Zero's like, cool, I used to sleep there. Like, oh, okay.
Sweet.
Cool. What a fun thing.
Anyway, so this one is K.
Like, okay,
this
cool.
Is M.
Yeah, so Zero at this point in the story just doesn't even know what happened to his mom.
No,
she just left one day and never came back.
If he had $1 million, though, he'd hire a whole team of private investigators to go and find her.
So out at the dig site, the tensions are continuing to rise because, again, there is a sort of hierarchy in place here, and Stanley has kind of thrown things into an uproar. He and Zero both have, but they're kind of blaming Stanley for the fact that Zero is helping dig his holes, and, none of the other boys have anybody to help them dig their holes. And they are, comparing him to a slave master, which he sort of objects to. And then Zigzag, who is one of the other white kids, at lunchtime is like, oh, Stanley, please let me dig your hole for you, please. Here, I'll give you my cookie if you'll let me dig your hole for you. And Stanley's like, dude, fucking leave me alone. Like, I'm doing a thing with Zero. Like, I'm not making him dig my hole for me. Like, we have an agreement. And Zigzag does not care about that. And they get into a little bit of a scuffle, which Stanley is trying to defuse. He's like not trying to fight, but who should witness this but fucking Dr. Pendanski, who comes over and is like, no, Stanley, hit him back. Hit Zigzag. Get into a fight with him. And he's like, okay. And so he sort of kind of hits Zigzag a little bit, and Zigzag goes off.
Yeah.
And is just kind of beating the crap out of Stanley, which Zero doesn't like. So Zero jumps up onto his back and is trying to choke him out. Like really doing it.
That is an effective sleeper hold.
Yeah, he it's sort of implied straight up about to kill Zigzag.
Mm-hmm.
And finally Pendanski's like, oh, maybe this is bad, and fires his gun into the air to break them up. And they call the warden and Mr. Sir out to be like, all right, what's going on out here? And Zigzag does not have any sense of solidarity, so he's like, well, caveman doesn't dig his own holes, and sort of tattles on him. And so Stanley's like, well, no, he digs part of my hole because I'm teaching him how to read.
Mm-hmm. And
they're all like, stop it. Everyone needs to be digging their own holes. We need to stop trying to teach people how to read. I don't want any of this. Pendanski finds this whole situation hilarious, of course, because he's like, why would you even bother trying to teach Zero how to read? Because Zero's so stupid, In fact, all this trying to learn is probably making his blood boil, and that's what's making him violent. He's too stupid to learn, and it's making him angry. And he tells Stanley that you might as well teach a shovel how to try to read.
We'll take a quick pause and come out of the treehouse here for just a second and remind you that historically, these are the same arguments that were used to prevent black people from learning to read and other sort of educational skills, because it would fry their little brains and cause them to revolt and kill nice, self-respecting, white, God-fearing people.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, back to the desert.
And this moment is another one that is just like stuck in my head all these years, where Pendanski is mocking Zero, and he's like, D-I-G, what does that spell? And Zero takes the shovel and he smacks him across the face with it and says, dig. And then he runs out into the desert.
So good.
It's very good.
Fuck that man.
Pendanski is... everyone here is evil. I think he's the most evil. It's so bad. And now the adults are in a little bit of a situation, because as we explained before, you can't survive in that desert. Without water and without shelter, there are just like Zero will be dead. And technically, he will have died on our watch. So they now either need to go waste a bunch of resources, in their mind, going to look for him, or they could just kind of delete the records.
Yeah.
And make it look like Zero was never there.
The warden straight up says he doesn't have any family. No one will be looking for him. He doesn't.
Mr. Sir says that.
Well, they all agree.
Yeah, they're all in agreement that, like, he doesn't have family. Mr. Sir has sort of started to unravel in this scene a little bit, where he's like, I don't know about all this. I don't know, guys. This seems bad. But Pendanski and the warden are both like, we'll just delete his letters. And Pendanski, who I guess is just like a hacker on top of everything else, is like, I can get into the state's records, not just their personal, like, camp records. Mm-hmm. He's like, I will hack into the state system and delete him from everywhere, which has got to be a crime. But he's like, I don't even think we need to be this thorough, though, because no one will ever come looking for him. No one cares about him.
I care about Zero. I care about Hector.
Yeah.
Because Stanley was just able to sit and listen to all of this. He was just
standing in the doorway for some reason.
And then they didn't immediately murder him.
Yeah, buck wild. And here, Mr. Sir says something very strange to Stanley, which is like, oh, you care about him? His blood is on your hands then.
What
Which is like, fuck? What are you talking about? You have a truck. Go look for him.
Yeah.
Anyway, everyone is sort of in agreement that Zero is just dead. He is just going to die out in the desert. But back in the day, Stanley the First was also stranded out in the desert, and he found refuge in God's thumb.
Yep.
Whatever that means.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe Hector won't die.
I heard he lived for 16 days without food and water.
Well, maybe.
That's what I heard.
Stanley is clearly feeling kind of bad about this whole situation. He's
As he should, because Zero's blood is on his hands.
Well, yeah, apparently. And he's out there, he's like, Zero! But Zero's nowhere to be found. But they replace him rather quickly, so a new boy shows up. And his name was Twitch.
Mm-hmm.
And Twitch is
a gamer.
Kind of here for no reason at all. But his expertise is hot wiring cars.
Grand Theft Auto.
Yes, he likes to steal cars. Which is interesting because, Mr. Sir uses a truck to bring the boys the water out when they're digging their holes every day.
Yeah.
And I guess Twitch is just there to be like, hey, Stanley, get in the driver's seat and drive the car.
Mm-hmm.
His grand expertise is like they leave the car. The keys are in the car. The car is like running already.
Right.
Stanley doesn't have to do anything to steal this car. But anyway, Twitch is like, hey, steal the car, Stanley. But of course, Stanley doesn't know how to drive. So he gets like 10 feet before just driving into a hole.
There's a lot of holes out there.
Yeah. And so he now also has to run out into the desert where all of the buzzards are, with no water.
Well, the good news is, and I suppose that scene is there because it's like, they know that they can abandon Zero, but they also know that Stanley would have people looking for him.
Yes.
And so if Stanley got away with the water truck, man, that would have been a lot more convenient, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But even just crashing the truck means that they don't have any ways of pursuing him. So he gets to go look for Zero unfettered.
Yes. And as you just pointed out, and as Mr. Sir comes to realize and says to the warden, Zero is one thing, but Stanley is a person someone will come looking for. He has parents.
Stanley is white.
Yeah, he is important to someone. And so she's like, we're going to wait a week, and then we're going to report that he ran away, and we're going to call in the police and the search dogs and the helicopters, and by then, there will be nothing left to find, so we won't be in trouble anymore.
Terrible.
Which is not a good plan, because they'll still find the fucking bones.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, the warden is not exactly a criminal mastermind. Let's just call it that. But out in the desert, Stanley finds an upturned boat with 2 legs sticking out from under it. And it's Zero! And he's still
dead.
alive!
Oh, wow!
He's not dead! They embrace one another, and they're like, oh my god, I thought you were dead, I'm so happy to see you, blah, blah, blah. And he finds out that Zero has been surviving.
Off of his own sploosh.
Oh my god. On some jars that he found in the upturned boat in the dry lake bed.
Yeah, jars of hooch.
And it's some ancient goop that kinda, a little bit, tastes like peaches.
By the by, these would just be liquor at this point.
I mean, if that even anymore. I mean, what they would be is goddamn dysentery and botulism. That's what they would be. But that's how Zero has survived out here for 3 days or whatever. And Stanley is like, come on, man, we gotta go back. We'll just tell the warden where we really found the lipstick, and then maybe she won't be mad at us. And Zero's like, no, absolutely not. I'm not going back. And then he's also like, what's Marilu? Stanley's like, what? He's like,
what's Mariello?
Mariello? What's that? They're like,
Mariello.
what are you talking about? And he's like, on the outside of the boat. And they go outside. And what is the boat called?
Mariello.
God damn it.
It's Mary Lou.
It's Mary Lou. God, she must have been hot if somebody bothered to name a boat after her. Am I right?
Imagine what she looked like in a bikini. Hey.
Yes, this is Sam's boat, which doesn't have a skeleton in it anymore, which is kind of interesting. So not sure exactly what happened to Sam's body, but they sure did leave the peaches in the boat, I guess, which is good, so they don't die. And while they're out there looking at the letters on the side of the boat, they notice a weird rock sticking out of the top of one of the nearby mountains. It kind of looks like a thumb.
A little bit.
Kind of like a giant thumb.
Like God's thumb.
Like a thumb of God.
Wow.
Whoa.
New anime. God thumb.
Is it wrong to pick up girls at the rock that's shaped like God's thumb? Yeah, but here in the desert where Stanley's great-grandfather almost died that one time, there's a big rock shaped like a thumb.
Huh.
Maybe he wasn't crazy after all.
Maybe.
So they're like, well, that's an idea. Let's head for the mountain. So they go to the mountain and they're starting to climb. It's a long climb up and they still don't have any water in a stomach full of Civil War era peach bacteria. And things are just not going well for Zero. They're fully like free climbing up a cliff face, and Stanley is like starting to fall, and Zero has the shovel, and he holds onto the shovel side of the shovel and uses it to pull Stanley up and just slices his hands fully open. So he's also got tetanus on top of everything else. And he's dying of dysentery and throwing up and falling off the mountain. And Stanley is okay, I'm just going to put you on my back and I'm going to carry you up the mountain.
Huh.
And
Weird.
here we get a reminder.
That's when I paused and I was like, oh, was the lady's name Madame Zeroni? Like Hector Zeroni?
Like Hector Zeroni?
Huh.
Yeah, and just in case that was too subtle for you, the Eartha Kitt voiceover shows back up and is like, you must carry me up the mountain. Because remember how this is a magical realism story? I bet you forgot about that. Stanley has got Zero on his back and he's climbing up the mountain. He's like, God, there's so many bugs up here. Wait a minute. Bugs mean water. And not just water. What's growing around this stream of dirty water that they find?
The sweetest dang onions I ever done tasted.
That's right. They have found Sam's onion patch.
Wow.
So they have both water and food, at least for now. And Stanley is so happy that he lies down in the stream and he starts to sing. This is the moment that I think plays slightly better in the book, because in this scene in the movie, he finds the water, he puts Zero on the ground, wakes Zero up with the water, finds the onions, and then is so happy that he starts to sing. In the book, he's laying Zero down and singing to Zero while he's asleep.
Aww.
He is specifically in the book singing to Zero, not just singing because he's happy. But anyway.
Yeah.
He has sung the song. He has carried Zero up the mountain.
Right.
And now the ghost of Madame Zeroni is pleased.
And the curse is lifted!
The curse is lifted! And we know it's lifted because we go back to the Yelnats' apartment where Stanley III is trying to, eat a bowl of peaches while he's boiling his disgusting shoes and just dropping his peaches in the water, and it's all a disaster. And then he's like, wait a minute. And he brings the shoe over to his wife, who is trying to eat at the time, and is like, could you not make me smell gross shoes while I'm trying to eat? And he's like, no, smell the shoes. And she's like, oh my God, fine, whatever. I don't smell anything.
I don't smell anything.
I don't smell anything.
I don't smell anything.
So he has discovered the cure for foot odor. And can you imagine a worse smell combination than peaches and onions? It's so gross.
No, see, those two counteract one another perfectly.
It's perfect.
It's harmony of odoriferousness.
Oh, God. And back on the mountain, now that Zero isn't dying anymore, he tells Stanley his secret, which is, of course, as he has been hinting this whole time, that he stole the shoes. He didn't know they were a charity thing. He was at the shelter. He was just a person staying at the shelter, and he saw some shoes that were just on a table, and so he was like, oh, cool, free shoes. And he was...
Also, he doesn't know how to read, so...
Yeah, they do make a point in the book of being like, well, yeah, there was a sign next to them, but I don't know how to read, so I couldn't read it. And so he took the shoes and was just walking around in the shoes, thinking nothing of it, and then he saw people start to freak out and heard police sirens and was like, oh shit, I guess these were important shoes. And so he takes them off and he throws them off the side of the bridge where they fall on Stanley's head. And then Zero got arrested at a Payless the next day for stealing shoes anyway. So
hilarious. Also really funny that scene where he's wearing those cleats and just walking on it. They're too big for him.
And they're cleats. They're not shoes. But Stanley is like, you know what, man? I think it's destiny, actually, that you and I ended up here together. And you know what? His sense that things have started to change for him, the movie says, is correct. Because now that his father has a successful invention, and I guess managed to monetize it immediately, he now has the money to hire a lawyer. And the lawyer looks at Stanley's case and is like, you put a boy in jail for that? What? And so she is driven out to Camp Green Lake and been like, you are going to release Stanley immediately. And the warden and everybody are like, come back with a warrant, mate.
Yeah.
Something.
We have a right to protect our children.
Yeah, we don't.
Get out of here.
Paperwork. And the lawyer's like, okay, fine. I will be back tomorrow, and I will be taking Stanley with me. So she's coming back tomorrow, and the adults are like, we have got to come up with a lie about why Stanley is not here, because he is most likely dead. They're not dead, fortunately. The Mountain Onion boys are talking about how glad they are to have met one another and how everything feels better now. It just feels like things are going to go well from here on out. I don't know. Stanley's like, I'm feeling lucky. Let's go dig one more hole.
Just one more.
One more hole. And they go back across the desert to the hole where Stanley originally found the lipstick. And it's a good intuition that he has, because there has been a legend for many years that Kate Barlow buried her treasure in this desert because she was robbing all of those people. She must have had a bunch of money, right?
Robbed every bank this side of Camp Green Lake.
Yeah.
Before there was a camp here.
And in the movie, we just get a flashback of her, like, sitting on Sam's boat in the dry lake. This lake went dry fucking immediately. Because I don't know that they specify. Well, they do specify it in this scene. The woman is like, it hasn't rained since Sam died, which is the mythology that from the day that Sam died, it didn't rain in Green Lake anymore. And in the book, Trout Walker and his wife, who is canonically like 20 years younger than him, break into Kate Barlow's house, tie her up, and take her out onto the lake, and are like, show me where you buried your treasure. But in this one, she's just like already sitting out there, and they come find her, and she's like hallucinating Sam, as people in distress on this lake often do, apparently. He's just kind of haunting it.
Don't worry, Miss Catherine. I can fix that.
I can fix that.
Float away like a ghost.
Yep.
I'm a ghost.
Yep. And Trout is like, tell me where your loot is. I lost all my money when the lake dried up. And she's like, you guess you shouldn't have lynched my boyfriend then. Maybe you'd still have money. But anyway, they're like, if you don't tell us where it is, you're going to wish you were dead. And she was like, I have wished I was dead for 20 years. Damn. You cannot hurt me. And to prove it, she is like, you can look for my treasure forever, and your children can look, and your children's children can look, and none of them will ever find it.
For 100 years it will not rain in Green Lake.
Yeah, and she sees a yellow spotted lizard crawl out from under the boat, and she's like, fucking watch me, and she lets the lizard bite her, and then she just dies right there in front of them.
Right there.
But the boys are feeling luckier than Trout Walker did that day, and they head back to Stanley's previous hole, and they get to digging. And wouldn't you know it, they find a full-ass treasure chest. Just a full treasure chest, because why wouldn't it be a treasure chest? And just as they sort of pull it out of the dirt, the warden shows up. She's like, well, thank you, boys. You've been a big help. But what else shows up right around the same time that the warden and Mr. Sir show up here?
Oh, about 1,700 of them yellow spotted lizards.
Yup, because it turns out the treasure chest was on top of a lizard nest, and now there's just a bunch of them, and they are crawling all over these boys.
The director was like, y'all, we got a little bit more CGI budget left. We should probably just spend it all in one scene, don't you think?
Give me about 1,500 lizards in this hole.
1,500 lizards.
It's the most lizards. And the warden is like, well, fuck that. I'm not getting in the hole. But fortunately, we won't have to wait all that long. These boys will be dead soon. And that'll be convenient, because then when the lawyer shows back up, we'll have a body to give her and be like, well, he stole this from my cabin and then jumped into this hole and died. So I win, I guess. And here, we find out finally, this late in the movie, why the warden wants this treasure so badly. Why? Why is it?
Because she was abused as a child and deserves it. She's been here longer than X-Ray.
She's been here the whole time. Yeah, yes. So the warden, they say her first name like one time, and I don't remember what it is, but her last name is Walker. And her grandfather was named Trout. She is Trout Walker's granddaughter.
Wow.
And he, after Kate Barlow died, was obsessed with finding her treasure and would just go out every day, even on holidays, even on Christmas, and he would dig holes, and he made his kids dig holes, and he made his grandchildren dig holes. And so she has spent every day of her whole life, presumably, on that stupid lake looking for this stupid treasure.
Her whole life?
Her whole life. Her whole life. So now she is like, well, finally, the end is in sight. But weirdly, the lizards don't bite the boys.
Wow.
Why don't the lizards bite the boys?
Was it because they ate a bunch of onions?
It was. And what did Sam say way back at the beginning of the story?
The hidden onion gun that even the dang old lizards don't like his onion tonic, or they don't.
If you drink his onion tonic, the lizards won't bite you. And these boys have been eating nothing but onions for like 3 days.
Wow.
And so they smell like shit, and the lizards don't want to bite them.
They sure are content just crawling all over them.
Yeah, they're
for
just
hours.
chilling. Well, you gotta figure that the boys, they've got warm body temperature, and so the lizards are like, sweet, a rock. Nice. This is here for me. And the lizards are just crawling all over them, but it does buy them enough time for Stanley's lawyer to show back up. And she comes out to the hole, and she's like, what the fuck? What the fuck? Get them out of the hole right now. Do it right now. What is going on here? You insane people. And the warden tries to be like, well, he broke into my cabin and he stole that and he tried to run away with it. And
Cool. He's about to die. Get him out of the hole with the 1,500 CGI lizards.
Yeah. And eventually Stanley and Zero just like stand up and crawl out of the hole, and the lizards still don't bite them.
They sort of just realize like, oh, well.
We could probably just leave. And so they climb out of the hole, and the warden tries to take the treasure chest away from Zero, and Zero's like, no, you can't. It belongs to Stanley. Because at one point when they're sitting in the hole, Zero's like, hey, is your first name just your last name spelled backwards? And Stanley's like, yeah. Why have you just asked me that out of the blue? And when they crawl out, Zero's like, no, you can't have this. It has Stanley's name on it.
Whoa.
Because guess what? Kissin' Kate Barlow's treasure was.
That dang old treasure box that she stole from Stanley Yelnats, who she didn't kiss, because if she kissed him, she'd have killed him, and then none of y'all would be here.
Yep. So the treasure chest literally has the name Stanley Yelnats on it. And so when the warden tries to be like, they stole it, and the lawyer's like, he stole a thing that had his name on it? I don't believe you.
You are preposterous.
It's sort of a triumphant moment for Zero because and I figured this out because I can read now.
And because of the power of friendship.
Yeah. And so the lawyer's like, all right, Stanley, I'm taking you home. The judge has released you, blah, blah, blah. It's time to go. And he's like, I'm not going anywhere without Hector. And she's like, I'm not Hector's lawyer. I can't do anything. He's like, no, I'm not going anywhere without him. And she's like, okay, fine. Can someone please go get me Hector's file so I can see if there's anything I can do here? And all of the adults are looking around like, the thing is, we don't have any files about Hector. She's like, you don't have any files about him. Fascinating.
Wow. Almost as if he's being held here illegally.
Yeah.
So,
if you have no record of Hector, then you have no records of why he's being held here. Therefore, we can't prove that he's supposed to be here. Therefore, Hector is free to go.
We also get some great sort of one final moment of body comedy from John Voight as he's trying to hide his face with a manila folder.
Oh, he's got
from
a
the
clipboard
sheriffs.
up.
Yeah,
He's hiding behind it, trying not to let anybody see him.
They can't see me, Mr. Sir.
So Stanley and Zero are now going home, and the other boys notice them back, and they're like, oh my God, you're not dead. That's awesome. And they're like, oh my God, you're going home. That's so great. And in a very sweet moment, that is sort of a moment of foreshadowing that is never borne out because they never made a movie of the sequel to Holes. But Armpit pulls Stanley aside and is like, hey, can you call my mom when you get out and tell her that Theodore says he's sorry?
Bam.
Which would be a really great setup if they ever made Small Steps into a movie, which they didn't. But anyway, Mr. Sir also gets noticed by the sheriff or whoever. In the book, it's literally the attorney general. The attorney general comes to inspect this camp and is like, what the fuck? But this just cop guy who's with the lawyer is like, hey, now wait a minute. You're not supposed to have a gun. And so he's arresting Mr. Sir for violating his parole.
Yeah.
Interesting.
He recognizes him as none other than
Marion. Of course, all the boys think it's funny because Marion's not a boy's name. Ha 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 ha.
But then Mr. Sir says, it's not.
No, it's not. Which is a very strange moment. It's like, okay, all right, okay, Mr. Sir, okay. All right. We're all just not going to read too far into that. All right. Okay. And
is Holes transphobic?
Or is it not? Unclear. I do like the idea of a person being like, all right, I have transitioned. I need to, choose a new name for myself. What will express to the world that I am a man and I really want to step into my masculine identity. I know Mr. Sir.
Yeah.
It's very good. Anyway.
I also like the idea of transitioning to avoid, your
avoiding your parole officer.
Yeah, just like evade
They'll
your past
never
crimes.
catch me.
Yeah.
That's also a very good idea for a sequel.
Because it's not me anymore, you see. Marion did those crimes, but I'm Mr. Sir.
Yeah. Anyway, it starts to rain.
What?
The curse is broken.
What? And all the boys turn to onions.
Yep, just like in the fairy tales. No, X-Ray sort of pulls Stanley aside and is like, hey man, I want you to be careful out there in the real world. Not everyone is as friendly as us, which is sort of a sweet thing to sort of end X-Ray's story on. And the warden asks Stanley to see what's in the trunk. And Stanley is just like,
fuck you, bitch.
absolutely not, ma'am. Goodbye forever. Go to jail. So the chest is just like full of like costume jewelry for whatever reason, and a bunch of bonds and things like that are worth a bunch of money now. So Stanley's family gets rich off of their own stolen fortune. Like it is their money. It comes back to them. But Stanley is like, we should split it with Zero because like our two families have been sort of intertwined this whole time. And so they split it equally. And they both buy giant, nice houses with pools and stuff. And Zero hires a private investigator, and he does find his mom, who is not dead. And in fact, she's been looking for him the whole time because she loves him. The camp shuts down. All the boys are released for time served and sent to quote unquote real counselors.
Because Dr. Pendansky's not even a real doctor.
Yeah, he's not a real
Confirmed.
doctor. Confirmed. Clyde Livingston endorses Stanley's dad's foot product, which is called, of course, Sploosh. The end.
Digging up that hole, digging up that hole, and I guess you'll just have to fill in the rest of the holes yourself.
Yup.
Digging up that hole, digging up that hole.
I was gonna do some real research about like what makes a book adaptation into a movie any good, and then I just opened the tabs on my computer and didn't actually read them. So I don't know.
I think what makes it good is if people pay to see the movie.
Good point. You're right.
That's the rhetorician in me.
All about the Benjamins, baby.
Well, it's, what makes it good is if people like it and if they tell other people to see it.
Well, by that measure, I think this is a very good book-to-movie adaptation. Probably due in part to the fact that the author of the book, Louis Sachar, which, to be clear, is how his name is pronounced, he is the one who wrote this screenplay. So I do think that's part of what makes a book adaptation good, is if the original writer has some kind of hand in it. I mean, writing for screen and writing a novel are two different skill sets, but I think at least in the case of Holes, Louis Sachar did a pretty good job of adapting what is kind of a strangely formatted book with how often it jumps back and forth in time. Did you find it, the sort of jumping back and forth between the flashbacks, to be disorienting?
Yeah, in a good way, though. It was unexpected, and it really did keep me on my toes. For a movie where all of the narrative threads do tie together perfectly by the end, it didn't seem like it was going to be such a cookie cutter narrative as we were going along, and I attribute that the pleasurable viewing experience to the sort of at some points disorienting flip-flops throughout time. And I like that. I thought it was good because I don't like to know exactly what's going to happen in a movie, when I'm a quarter of the way through. Yeah.
Well, and it feels sort of, at least to me, and I don't know if this is something that, like, maybe I'm just not well-versed enough, but that feels pretty sophisticated for a kid's narrative to have something that is playing with time in such a strange way and has magic, but not that much magic. And it's not like, and now Stanley's going to go to magic school and learn how all the magic works. Like, the fact that we are playing with time and so many of the characters are adult characters. Will kids care about an interracial romance between adults in the 1880s? They're going to have to, because it's here and it's important. Because only about like half of the time are you watching the kids in this kid's story. Kate Barlow's story is presented almost completely out of order. It ends at the end of her life, but otherwise, like, we meet her halfway through her life and then we shoot back in time and then we're moving forward in time. It just seems like that's not something that happens a lot in kids' stories. I could be wrong about that.
No, I mean, I do think that's what makes it complex.
Did you read a lot of his, or any of his books when you were little?
No.
Did you read any of, like, the Wayside Stories?
No.
His books are very weird. I mean, it's hard to explain just how strange Sideways Stories from Wayside School are, but it is just unapologetically absurdist. He does nothing whatsoever to explain why things are so weird in those stories. It's just a really tall school with one class on every level, and every chapter is about a different student, and every student is as weird as humanly possible. One of them is a child that shows up in a raincoat on a rainy day, and the teacher's like, you got to take that raincoat off. So he takes the raincoat off and he has a smaller raincoat on under that. And the whole story is just him taking off progressively smaller and smaller raincoats until he gets to the very bottom where he is a dead rat.
I thought he was just going to be Rain.
No, just a deceased rodent that was talking a few minutes ago and being like a real jerk about taking off his raincoats. And that's a whole chapter of that book. And so that's just sort of the Louis Sachar special, I feel like, is just like, this is going to be strange and your kids are going to be obsessed with it. And that was certainly my experience as a kid.
Yeah, I didn't read as a kid, so...
Well, you should go back and read those books. I bet you would like them.
What you described just sounds like a scary story to tell in the dark.
That is the other thing about, both this book and the Wayside Stories and stuff like that are, like, it is a little off-putting. It's a little bit scary. There is something scary about an evil child that turns out to be a dead rat.
You know what else is scary?
The prison industrial complex.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth.
Well, that was going to be my transition point. Is the other thing that makes this story so sophisticated is the subject matter and how unapologetic it is in dealing with it. So I think a lot of middle-class suburban kids can kind of point to this story, either the book or the movie, as like baby's first introduction to the horrors of the prison industrial complex. So I found an article from Bustle written by a writer named Charlotte Allen. And what does she have to say about her experience of reading Holes?
She writes, before reading Holes, I doubt I thought much about prison as a concept. It was a place where criminals and Batman villains were hauled off to, never to return again. Before Stanley Yelnats, I don't think I had seriously considered that people in prison could be innocent, or, in Zero's case, guilty of a minor crime that in no way merits a cruel and unusual punishment. It hadn't occurred to me that imprisoned people could be made to work grueling hours for someone else's profit, and I certainly wouldn't have thought of intergenerational trauma as one of the many factors that turns, quote, good boys into, quote, bad boys. Of course, I didn't quite articulate it that way in 4th grade, but I understood what Sachar was getting at. My stomach clenched at the injustice of Stanley's arrest when he'd done nothing wrong. I felt sick with Stanley and Zero as they were forced to dig day in and day out with no end in sight. I hated the quote-unquote counselors wielding their absolute power and repeatedly reminding Zero that he was worthless. I laughed too, of course, because Louis Sachar is nothing if not diabolically funny. But in between the palindromes and the pig-based bits of folklore, Sachar manages to plant a few unshakable truths about injustice. This prison is not fair. The kids aren't being reformed, just painfully exploited. In the 1800s love story flashbacks, readers learn that Kate, a white woman, was in love with Sam, a black man, who was murdered when the two of them attempted to elope together. The warden of Camp Green Lake is a literal direct descendant of the man who led the mob against them. She is searching for Kate's treasure, which was stolen from Stanley's family. Stanley's family, in turn, screwed over Zero's family before immigrating to America, landing them under a family curse. It is only when Stanley helps Zero that the curse is broken. It is only when these two children band together that they are able to overthrow the warden, just barely beginning to untangle the generation's worth of trauma and injustice, and destroying this one small corner of the for-profit prison industrial complex.
That's the sort of genius of this book, right? This was Scholastic book fair fodder for like 20 straight years. You can probably still get a copy of Holes at a Scholastic book fair if they're even still doing those. And it really was aimed at the sort of Stanley demographic of people. They don't have family members in prison. They don't have police patrolling their neighborhoods constantly. Their parents have never had to sit them down and tell them about how to interact with the police. And so that lack of expertise is a thing that gets him thrown in jail, and that the story makes the point to say, like, first of all, this could happen to you too. Don't think that this is not a thing that could happen to you. But also, the only reason that he gets out of that situation is because his family has money. Based on a fluke, sort of. His parents just happen to come into enough money quickly enough that they can get a real lawyer. It's interesting that this story is playing with both the sort of capitalism aspect of it. We know that one of the reasons that we have so many people in prison in this country is because people like having cheap labor. If that were not an aspect of the prison industrial system in America, we wouldn't have as many people in prison. Capitalism has always been tied up with it. But I like that that quote makes a point to talk about all of these sort of generational aspects of that trauma too. The way that you interact with the criminal justice system in the modern day has a lot more to do with the various, like, forces that have been acting on your family and your community for generations than it necessarily does with anything specific that you have done in that moment. Zero doesn't take a pair of shoes because Zero is a person who likes to steal and is a bad person at his core and just steals things for the hell of it or whatever. He steals because he lives in a homeless shelter and he doesn't know how to read, and his mom has left him, and he doesn't have shoes. And those are all things that, in this story, those have kind of come together because his family is tied up with Stanley's, and there's this sort of magical, quote-unquote, curse hanging over it. But the real-life version of that is just like, yeah, he and his mother have been victimized by poverty and racism to the extent that it made sense to her to just leave her child in a park, and he had to fend for himself. That's not something that happened to them because his mom was a bad person either, who wanted to just abandon her child. Like, you'd have to go back so many generations, and at least for their family, it's like, well, yeah, somebody a million generations ago decided to enslave Africans. And so now Zero is in a prison camp.
This is why I asked in that initial scene when the cops show up at the Yelnats' apartment and we see multiple generations of Stanleys interacting with the police. You have Stanley Shia LaBeouf, who is absolutely ignorant and too innocent to even understand that there's a threat. You have his Harry Winkler father, Stanley, who is trying to appease the police. And he's like, no, don't just snatch it out of their hands like that. You don't want to make them angry. Don't make, like, can I offer you...
If we're just nice to the... Like, and Stanley's mom even says, like, he doesn't need a lawyer. He didn't do anything wrong. His parents just have no real... Like, they have a very, like, suburban white people sense of, like, if you just answer their questions and you're polite to them, everything will be fine.
But then... when I saw how Grandpa Stanley reacted, this is when I asked you, are they supposed to be Jewish? Because Grandpa Yelnats is very much...
having it.
No, I mean, he's like, these are the Gestapo. I've seen this before, you know, and to speak of intergenerational trauma, I mean, it just sort of invoked the sort of never forget mantra of like, this is how things happen. This is how they turn our good boys into dead boys, basically. And I like what you said about the idea of the real life version of the curse just being institutionalized racism, the white supremacy of it all, and scapegoating entire groups of people, Jewish people, black people.
to make it kid-friendly, he did filter it through this, like, there's a magical curse over these people. But that is, as with all things in this story, a very thinly veiled cover for, no, this is just a thing that happens to people in real life. And that's his way of sort of sneaking that lesson to kids in what seems like a vaguely whimsical sort of package.
Well, it's interesting delivery because when you say a family curse, you can't escape a family curse because you can't escape your family because you can't escape your genetics, your blood. And like that's all that people see when they see you. They see the Jewish kid or the black kid, and then the host of stereotypes that are summoned with that are what they react to, not Stanley Yelnats IV, an individual, or Hector Zeroni, an individual. You know, and so I think it's a really good one-for-one way to talk about this kind of stuff is the idea of a family curse.
The thing that I think is like even more worth talking about, because this is a story specifically about children, juvenile delinquents. When we think of the prison industrial complex, we think of adult prisons. But there is a whole murky ecosystem of real-life parallels to Camp Green Lake, and they are typically referred to as youth residential treatment facilities, but you have probably heard them referred to as troubled teen camps. Have you heard of troubled teen camps, Spencer?
If you're someone who's at risk of going to juvie, judges would frequently do this thing where it's like, okay, well, you need to participate in this camp or go stay there for a weekend and get scared straight.
Or they won't present it that way. They'll be like, we're all really worried about you, and we think you need some help, and we're going to send you to this nice camp. It's in the middle of the forest with no cell service, and we won't tell your parents exactly where it is on a map, but there's some nice people are really going to help you.
Well, I've never been to camp.
Yeah. So the American Bar Association has an interesting sort of overview of these facilities because they are tied up with the sort of juvenile detention system, but they're also not exclusive to that. These are not places where you can only get sent there if you've been arrested. You can kind of just get sent there. If you would read that overview for me, please, Spencer.
The quote-unquote troubled teen industry is a network of private youth programs, therapeutic boarding schools, residential treatment centers, religious academies, wilderness programs, and drug rehabilitation centers, and it dates back at least 50 years. The facilities are operated by private companies, nonprofits, or faith-based groups, and they promise to help youth with problems related to behavior, addiction, and eating disorders, and, in some cases, sexual orientation and gender identity. Despite numerous allegations of serious abuse that date back decades, they continue to operate in a largely unregulated way. To better understand this issue, here are 5 facts about the industry. Number 1. Youth can end up in the quote-unquote troubled teen industry in a variety of different ways. They can be privately placed there by their parents or families. State and local governments can pay these programs to take youths from their foster care and juvenile justice systems. School districts can place youth through their individualized education programs. Refugee resettlement agencies can place youth, or they can be placed by mental health providers. Number 2. In 2008, the U.S. Government Accountability Office, GAO, published the report Residential Programs Selected Cases of Death, Abuse, and Deceptive Marketing. The report identified thousands of allegations of abuse, some of which resulted in death at residential programs across the country and in American-owned and American-operated facilities abroad. Despite these findings, more than a decade ago, there is no federal regulation or oversight of these programs, nor are there consistent regulations among states. Furthermore, many states completely exempt religious boarding schools from licensing requirement and from oversight from education and child welfare authorities. States and facilities do not even keep track of the number of placements nor length of stay. There is no file for Hector Zeroni.
Yeah.
Number 3. It is estimated that between 120 to 200,000 young people reside in some type of group home, residential treatment center, boot camp, or correctional facility. While the exact number of private placements are unknown, estimates are more than 50,000 of those youths were placed privately by their parents. Number 5. 4?
4.
Number 4. The troubled teen industry is a big business. It receives an estimated $23 billion, that's billion with a B, of annual public funds to purportedly treat the behavioral and psychological needs of vulnerable youth. Many residential facilities operate as for-profit organizations. One such for-profit facility, Sequel, has an annual revenue that, quote, regularly tops $200 million. As of 2017, 90% of their revenue came from Medicaid, Medicare, and approximately 500 additional federal, state, and local programs. Programs pay Sequel as much as $800 per day for each child at a facility. Well, good news, we won't have to worry about Medicaid paying for that anymore.
God almighty.
Number 5, hashtag Breaking Code Silence is a survivor-led campaign created in 2014 to encourage people who have endured the abuse in the quote-unquote troubled teen industry to speak out about their experiences. Descriptions of experiences in the industry include descriptions of strip searches, physical abuse, sexual abuse, physical, mechanical, and chemical restraint, conversion therapy, lack of appropriate health treatment, including mental health, forbidding communication, and lack of basic needs like food and water.
So chances are, if you have heard that Breaking Code Silence hashtag before, the public figure you have heard it from is Paris Hilton. It's the sort of horror behind her public persona. Her parents fully sent her to one of these places when she was a teenager. She was put in solitary confinement. She was abused. She was forced to, scrub floors with her own toothbrush. The most stereotypical, horrible stuff you've ever heard. In her documentary, she reunites with some people that she was in one of these camps with, and one of them was like, yeah, I used to watch what was it called? Was it The Simple Life?
Yeah.
Whatever her TV show was, where she was like, I don't know how to wash a dish. And the girl was like, this fucking bitch is lying. I have seen her do dishes before. But that's the whole point of her public persona is to be like, I don't know how to do anything. But it's like, yeah, if you ask her, she's like, well, yeah, I had to do that when my parents sent me away to a prison camp because I went to parties too much. So this was a rough thing to research, but it's interesting to hear that sort of list of all of the different issues that you just read out that sort of survivors have spoken up about, because you can kind of see their equivalents in the movie Holes. A lot of those things show up. Some of them get played down a little bit in the movie, but things like the strip searches, that's something that happens to Stanley in the book. He's just in the middle of a cabin with adults in it, forced to take all of his clothes off.
That happens in the movie very briefly.
Yeah, very briefly, and then it's a weird, funny pratfall, and he, is in his underwear and can't get his pants off and falls over or whatever. Mm-hmm. The kind of emotional abuse that we see Pendanski dishing out is very, very common. There is a report from the National Disability Rights Network called Desperation Without Dignity, where they kind of go point by point and discuss the way each of these different types of abuse show up in these different facilities across the country. They have quotes from people that they've interviewed throughout it, and there's that very brief moment in the story where I think it's Squid or somebody sees Stanley writing a letter to his mom and is like, no, if your parents cared about you, you wouldn't be here. That is the party line at these places. You are either such a disappointment to your parents that they couldn't stand to live with you anymore and so they sent you away, or you don't have parents and it's because they don't love you. Your parents just abandoned you and that's why you're like this. Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool, guys.
The part you said about the parents not knowing exactly where they are, it's so that the parents don't have a change of heart and try to come get them.
Yeah. The kidnapping part is so wild, and I don't know if that's part of the package that these camps sell to parents, but the idea that you don't even have the courage to look your child in the eye and tell them you are having whatever behavioral issues and we are overwhelmed and we don't know how to deal with it, and so we tried to seek out some help for you, that you won't even have that conversation with your own kid. Why did you have children? Why would you even bother? You are selfish, horrible people who do not deserve to have your child come back to you. You don't deserve a well-behaved child who does whatever you want them to do. You are a monster. Yeah, no, it's And it's like, that's not even the worst part of a lot of these camps. There is all of the, like, physical stuff, abusing people, and the part where Pendansky is, like, encouraging them to fight with each other. That is also a part of these real-life camps. But there's also, like, it's like cult shit, like forcing people to take psychiatric medications and denying them medical care. That's how frequently kids end up dying. They're obviously sick or injured, and if you send them to a hospital, they might tell somebody what you're doing to them, and so you don't, and so they die. The part that gets me the most is this quote-unquote therapy. As we said, there's no... I mean, especially if it's religiously affiliated, there's no licensing requirements, no qualifications whatsoever. Anybody who's ever heard the voice of God or whatever gets to do whatever they want to anybody else. They're constantly surveilling kids, and they're encouraging kids to shun one another. If, like, one of them is doing something the counselors don't like, they turn the other kids against them. There are, like, point systems where it's like, we won't let you leave this place until you get 5,000 points, and every day we're going to manufacture a new way to take points away from you so you can never leave. All of this is to say nothing about the conversion therapy aspect that a lot of these places have, which is just torture. It is just child torture. Ugh. I got really mad when I was researching this part of it.
Yeah.
And the layer on top of all of that is, this is, as with all other sort of school to prison pipeline stuff, we know it disproportionately affects already marginalized kids. Like, we know that these people, like teachers and doctors and therapists and cops and everybody else, are more likely to interpret the behavior of Black and brown kids as misbehaving and dole out harsher punishments and more frequently suggest kids for these types of quote-unquote treatments. We know it's going to affect people with mental health conditions more frequently, because again, if you're the kind of person who, instead of just getting your child a psychiatrist, is going to send them to the woods for being bipolar or whatever, you are not a person with a lot of respect for the mental health system. And obviously, like, queer and trans kids are being targeted by these conversion therapy things too. So we know that all of this is just built to punish people who are already vulnerable and, at least in some cases, steal money from their parents and get a whole lot of tax money. Mm-hmm. It's just torturing children for profit. That's all this whole system is, because, of course, there is no evidence whatsoever that taking a child out of their home, throwing them into the woods and making them do manual labor under threat of literal death is going to help correct any kind of behavior problems that might exist.
In fact, we have quite a lot of evidence to suggest the opposite.
Yeah.
At least in adult inmates, and how a lot of these things show up in prisons for grown people. See recidivism rates.
Listen, I am not a perfect person. I don't have perfectly consistent views. But I do think the prison industrial complex is bad and wrong and very, very frequently racist and homophobic and ableist and so forth. And I wouldn't say that this book perfectly nails that. There is a specific quote that I have pulled out of the book, which is sort of Louis Sachar's way of addressing the presence of people of different races in this prison camp, if you wouldn't mind. Did I put that one on your sheet? Okay. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind reading that for me, Spencer.
Right around page 84, Sachar tells us, quote, Stanley was thankful that there were no racial problems.
None whatsoever.
End quote. Now, X-Ray, Armpit, and Zero were black. He, Squid, and Zigzag were white. Magnet was Hispanic. On the lake, they were all the same reddish-brown color, the color of dirt.
Yeah, so that's kind of Louis Sachar's way of being like, well, yeah, there's people of different races here, but I don't really want to write about all that, so I'm just not gonna. Which is like, okay. When Zero starts digging Stanley's holes, the other boys, they're like, it must be nice to have a slave, Stanley. And that's just sort of there to, like, make Stanley upset. But it does bear remembering that the real-life versions of these facilities are just ways for already marginalized children to be further traumatized and mistreated, so unscrupulous people can make money, tax money, no less, off of their suffering and pass it off as good works. Because once again, hello, fellow Christians, this is an us problem. And frequently in real life, no one cares when these kids are just sort of spat back out into society worse than they were before.
No, we just put them in grown-ass adult prisons.
Yeah, then they get to go to adult prison and, like, pick food that gets sold to fast food places. This is part of the machine that creates extremely low-wage prison workers. That is part of the point. And these places generally don't get shut down unless something like what happens in this book happens in real life, which is like you do a dumb enough white-collar crime that you get caught, basically. It's Al Capone going to prison for tax fraud or whatever. That's what people care about. They don't care if a bunch of kids die in the desert. They care if you're, like, too obvious in how you're misappropriating taxpayer money or whatever. I mean, I think this story wants you to kind of deal with that too. It wants you to be like, if Stanley's parents didn't manage to hire a lawyer, not only would Stanley might have just done his 18 months and gone home and been fucked up for the rest of his life, but Zero would have just been missing. They deleted him from the state's files. There would be no record of him. He wouldn't exist anymore. He would, like, get out and not be able to get a job because the counselors at his prison camp deleted his identity from the official state records. And no one would have noticed if Stanley hadn't put his foot down and say, no, I'm not leaving without him. And as always, when I'm looking for guiding truths in trying times, I found a McSweeney's article that I think actually kind of sums up the issue with these camps pretty well. It's from back in either 2020 or 2021, and it is titled, "The Child Labor Camp from Holes Reopens Amid Coronavirus Concerns."
Finally! Camp Green Lake is restating its commitment to character-building excavation. We know parents are struggling to find outlets for their child's education, socialization, and trumped-up criminal charges right now. So, we are proud to offer an all-encompassing solution, making your bad kid good again through a proven treatment plan called Digging Holes in Places Where It Never Rains. After all, whether it's the result of a broken system virtually unchanged despite a global pandemic and nationwide protests, or a no-good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather, we believe all children deserve the chance to suffer.
And unfortunately, I think an upsetting number of American adults would just sort of buy that sentiment right there on face value. And they do, all the time. I don't really know what to do about all that, but it's good to be aware that if somebody shows up and is like, hey, does your children sometimes misbehave in school? Send them to the desert with us. You can trust us. Don't send your kids with those people. And if you think you'll ever be tempted to do something like that, don't have children.
Yeah.
Just don't do it. You're not cut out for it.
It's times like this that I'm thankful that we were broke as a joke because when I was a misbehaving teen, my parents' solution was to possibly enroll me in Hargrave Military Academy.
Oh, God.
Featured prominently in Major Pain.
That's a real place?
Yeah.
For Major Pain?
Well, they used it as part of the set, yeah. As it turns out, going to a bona fide military academy is expensive. As is going to Camp Green Lake and all these other freaking horrible places. But never fear, because we grew up in a house that was over 100 years old on some acres of land. And boy howdy, when the septic tank needed to be replaced, your boy was out there digging it up. With a shovel, with the Maddox. And let me tell you something. I did dig a trench to get around this old metal pipe because we had to figure out where it was broken exactly because like roots from boxwoods had grown up around it and cracked it. And we needed to replace it with that modern PVC pipe. Here's the thing about the movie Holes that I need you all to understand. A 5-foot deep hole that is 5 foot wide will take you longer than all day to dig with a shovel.
Yeah.
It is no joke. And
digging holes is extremely difficult to do.
It's extremely difficult, and I need you to understand how big of a hole that is to dig every day.
That's why X-Ray got that shorter shovel.
That's why X-Ray got every inch counts.
Yeah.
Now, it was, I think, a bit more difficult to dig down and around this big pipe without trying to also break the pipe. So what are you going to do? But I have firsthand experience digging holes this big. It takes a long ass time.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, the fear of just like creepy crawly things coming up out of the dirt is real, because snakes love exposed dirt because it's cool. There's water. I'm just saying, this movie is frightening in ways that if you took 5 minutes to go out and experience for yourself, you know what? All right,
go
that's
out and dig a hole now. Turn this podcast off. Go dig a hole now.
I think we've hit something really important here. I'd like to invite you all to the Safe Place for Boys summer camp, where we dig holes for snakes and bury ourselves in them. Okay, great, solved.
Yeah, and our goal is actually to take good boys and turn them into bad boys.
Yes.
That's our goal.
Yeah.
Send us your edgy sort of 20-something men, and we'll really make monsters out of them.
Send us your yell gnats. I'll send you back a sinister Stanley.
Oh my god. Okay. Well, now that we've...
My sciatica's hurting.
I'm leaving the chair noises in. I refuse to keep apologizing for the chair noises. It's just how life is here. We're in a small closet and folding chairs. I don't know what to tell you. All right, before Spencer has to go to bed at 4:30, let's talk about the role of race in this story. As we've previously mentioned, Sachar doesn't really want to touch any sort of like inter-child racial tension in the A-plot. But, you know, the optics are that at least half, if not over half, of the prisoners that we see are people of color. And all of the adults imprisoning them are white. That is, again, not an accident.
But they have a woman in charge, and so isn't that progressive?
Feminist. He gets a little bit more into racism explicitly in the sequel to Holes, the book, which is called Small Steps, and follows Armpit after his release from Camp Green Lake. The overview is that the story deals much more overtly with issues of police brutality against Black boys and men, as well as against people with disabilities. It has some pretty overt depictions of domestic violence, as well as, interestingly, the financial abuse of child celebrities by their parents. Because, fun fact, one of the things Armpit does when he is released from Camp Green Lake is befriends a child pop star. Because why not,
Which
I guess.
one?
A fictional one.
Oh.
And her dad is stealing her money or something. But anyway, so that is something that Louis Sachar gets into a little bit more in some of his other work. But Holes is a little bit more interested in, at least in how it is handled in the A-plot with Stanley and the other campers, is sort of raising these issues and letting you draw your own conclusions rather than being like, yeah, the black kids and the white kids fought each other.
Oh no, Stanley, you better join up with the Aryan race gang.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't get any of that, and I think I personally am not that upset that we didn't have to deal with Nazis in this story on top of everything else. If only because, and again, never confirmed in any of the texts, not in the book and not in the movie, but it sure seems like the Yelnats family is Jewish.
They're Jewish.
You'll have to forgive Spencer for sounding far away. He's standing now because the chair was too loud. So Sachar himself was raised Jewish, as were many of the actors in this movie, specifically the actors playing members of the Yelnats family, and we're clearly drawing on some like Eastern European folklore and story traditions, and I guess the sort of curse, quote unquote, being like, yeah, anti-Semitism tends to follow you wherever you go and refuse to leave you alone no matter what. Which, again, if nothing else, is sort of interesting against this backdrop of these child reform camps, which always, even if they're not marketed as such, have that flavor of evangelical Christianity about them. So we have a boy who could be read as Jewish being sent to a camp to repent for his sins through the Protestant ethic of hard work. specifically hard physical labor, which is another layer of sort of ickiness. But I think he kind of balances that with a pretty frank discussion of homelessness. We've already kind of talked about the way that racism is tied up with homelessness, but I think Zero is meant to be sort of a symbol of, like, the most unfortunate boy. In the book, multiple times, Stanley is like, haven't you ever seen Sesame Street? And Zero, like, doesn't even know what Sesame Street is, which is, at least at the time that book was written, particularly sad, because at that point, that was still just a PBS property. It was designed for extremely poor children. That was the origin of Sesame Street, is they wanted an educational program that could be accessible to you, even if you had no money.
No money, except you still need money for a television.
You do still need a television, or at least, like, you need to know someone who has a television or go to a daycare that has a television or something.
You need to have access to electricity.
Yes.
Zero lives in the ground.
Zero...
in a tube under the swing set or something.
Zero lives in a park. Oh, God. Like, Zero is there to sort of teach the reader about the sort of layers of horror of racism on top of homelessness, on top of illiteracy, on top of your mother potentially having severe enough mental health problems that she just leaves. But I think the worst part is the sort of administrative abuse, the actual, like, deleting of the records, because that is a way of making literal the sort of unspoken stuff that is hanging around Zero. The system is built for this kid specifically to fall through every possible crack. And things like it becoming easier for these people to just delete the records from the system than it is to, like, send out a search party to look for Zero on the off chance that, like, his mom will come looking for him or some social worker somewhere will come looking for him is the kind of quiet violence that happens all the time in facilities like this. I mean, part of the reason that places like this are allowed to continue to exist is because it is so easy to convince people as a whole that certain classes of people, homeless people, criminals, juvenile delinquents, etc., don't matter. And once you convince them that they don't matter, you get to treat those people however you want. And in light of that, knowing that that is the sort of reality that Zero is up against, do you think it is morally correct for him to hit Dr. Pendanski in the face with a shovel?
Well, thank you for attending Dr. Bennington's philosophy seminar. First, we must ask ourselves, what does it mean for something to be morally correct? Moral philosophy, in fact, can be divided into multiple schools, but I question you this, Kelcee. Is morality not simply the pursuit of good, and is good not the pursuit of the eradication of evil? And if you had a chance to crush evil's face with a shovel, is it not the moral thing to do? Also, one might remember the sage bit of counseling that Pendanski gave Stanley, which is to stand up for himself when Zigzag started a fight with him and to hit him back. I don't know, maybe Zero was listening to that lesson, and when Pendanski was teasing him about not being able to read, he decided to prove him wrong by striking back. So I think on both the sort of moral philosophy realm as well as the, well, you literally told me to do it realm, that yes, Zero is correct. You know, it used to be way back when, I'm going to say 2014 or so, when the phrase punch a Nazi started to become more and more popular in the internets. I took time to deliberate and to talk with students about, like, well, you know, violence isn't always the answer, and perhaps we're just escalating some of these more inflammatory discourses by giving people what they want. No, fuck it. Punch him in the face. Punch a Nazi in the face, hit Pendanski in the face with a fucking shovel.
Yeah.
Done.
I think I have come around to, here is my moral philosophy. I don't, in a vacuum, think it is correct to hit someone in the face with a shovel. However,
they're not in a vacuum, they're in a hole.
Well, yeah, exactly. In context, I think if you want people to be upset that someone has hit you in the face with a shovel, you should live your life in such a way that people don't want to see you get hurt. Obviously, there are nonviolent solutions to situations, but I also think people have a right to defend themselves. And I don't know. Zero had taken a lot of very real harm from that man, and I think if Pendanski didn't want to get hit in the face with a shovel, he shouldn't have tormented a child for months.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel. And speaking of appropriate reactions to violence, the place where this book does make its philosophy about racism particularly clear is in the, I don't know, B plot or C plot, I don't know which letter plot it is, but in the relationship between Sam and Catherine and what happens as a result of the violence perpetrated against Sam. So here I have another quote from the book. I mean, obviously these events happen in the movie, but we don't get this exact phrasing from any kind of narration, and I think it makes this book's philosophy pretty clear.
On page 115 of Sachar's Holes, quote, "These are the facts. The Walker boat smashed into Sam's boat. Sam was shot and killed in the water. Catherine Barlow was rescued against her wishes. When they returned to the shore, she saw Mary Lou's body lying on the ground. The donkey had been shot in the head. That all happened 110 years ago. Since then, not one drop of rain has fallen on Green Lake. You make the decision. Whom did God punish?" 3 days after Sam's death, Miss Catherine shot the sheriff while he was sitting in his chair drinking a cup of coffee. Then she carefully applied a fresh coat of red lipstick and gave him the kiss he had asked for. For the next 20 years, Kissin' Kate Barlow was one of the most feared outlaws in the West.
My reading of this section of the book has always been that the thesis of this book is that God, the literal God, punished Green Lake for racist violence. That the lynching of Sam is such a grave sin on a cosmic level that biblical God struck Green Lake down like fucking Sodom and Gomorrah. And that the fact that that statement, that whom did God punish statement, is immediately followed by this description of Miss Catherine transitioning into Kissin' Kate Barlow is like, everything that she did afterwards is completely correct. Her reaction to Sam's death is 100% appropriate. At no point is this story like, well, it's bad to shoot the sheriff. I know she was upset, but no. She shot the sheriff, she became an outlaw, and it was awesome. Except that she was very sad for the rest of her life. Like, the sadness for her is that she was so sad, not that she started doing evil things and needed some kind of cosmic punishment. She gets no cosmic punishment. She is rewarded at the end by being reunited with Sam. Green Lake and the Walkers specifically are punished forever because God is like, you lynched someone. That's so evil that your town deserves to die. Goodbye.
I'm curious about... So first of all, I like that we saw the sheriff not only be complicit or just sort of like allow a lynch mob to happen, he was heading it and knew that it was the wrong thing to do because he quote unquote gets drunk before a hanging. He always gets drunk before a hanging. So he needs to delude himself that this is just a part of life, culture, his position. Kissin' Kate Barlow as an outlaw is not a villain. She is a revolutionary in that she is targeting people like the sheriff and she is robbing banks. She is specifically targeting the Walkers of the world, these capitalists, these people that are land grabbing, pillaging, and just committing various atrocities to amass mounds of fortune for themselves. Now, where does the original Stanley Yelnats fit into that?
She robs him, but she doesn't kill him.
Right.
Which means that she is like, well, I want your stuff because I'm an outlaw and I rob people and you have a chest full of treasure, pirate style, just loose in your carriage here. But she has a moral philosophy about who she kills and who she doesn't. And for whatever reason, Stanley the First is not a person that she thinks is worth killing.
I just think it's interesting that there's a connection between like whatever this capital G God is that has cursed Green Lake and Madame Zeroni's curse on that no good pig stealing great-great-grandfather, which is people that violate their commitment, people that do not uphold their agreements, their contracts. And so Elia's was a very simple, silly one. You got to carry Madame Zeroni up the hill. The sheriff's was a more concrete one. Mm-hmm. Defend law and order in this town. Don't let people run amok.
I think her offense at him goes deeper than that. She is saying law and order should only be respected if they have morality at their heart. That's why they make a point for him to say, I'm not going to hang you. It's not against the law for you to kiss him, only for him to kiss you. And that is the sort of evil that she is reacting to in that moment.
They chose the word hanging, I think, because they didn't want to use the word lynching. If it were a hanging, as in capital punishment, then Sam would have been arrested, detained, had even just a kangaroo court day in trial. This is not that. This is not the sheriff doing something legal. He does invoke the law, but the due process of Sam is still totally circumvented and given up to mob rule.
But either way, what you end up with is Kate saying, to hell with the laws. The laws have nothing to do with morality.
Right.
There's no point in even trying to interface with the law as an entity, because she goes to a person who was supposed to help her, and they don't. Law is nothing anymore. It doesn't matter.
Right. Well, that's all
that matters is like, can I get rid of harmful people or can I not? And she decides that she can, and the story says, I agree, she can.
Well, that's all I was trying to make a connection between, is the idea that Madame Zeroni's curse originates when someone doesn't follow through on their commitment, breaks their oath. Kate Barlow's rampage begins when someone forgoes their duty, breaks their oath of justice, right? Upholding the law. Because as you mentioned, even if there's some gray area between, is this a lynch mob? Is this some kind of organized, sanctioned murder? The fact that there's just like public arson happening that he doesn't intervene in is the same point, right? He's not upholding the law. And we see this in the modern day as well with this guise of counselors. And a warden. These people that are supposed to be protecting, reforming, and rehabilitating children are doing the opposite. And thus, the curse needs to apply to them as well. Like, I think that's the connection between the sort of magical realism, the sort of religious invocation, and the kind of like social expectation in the modern day story. These are people who have made commitments and either not upheld them or made them falsely, and they deserve to be punished.
And if there are laws on the books that are unjust, then it is correct to break them.
Yeah.
It's interesting to have that connection in like the sort of overt acts of violence that both Kate and Zero, like in a vacuum, yes, shooting a man to death and hitting a man in the face with a shovel are both like overtly violent actions. But the story is kind of saying, because the sort of evil that hangs over this place and has been there since the day that Catherine lived there till modern times when Zero is there, is the same evil. The same evil that motivates Trout Walker is the same evil that motivates Pendanski. Because it is still there and it's still manifesting and it's still hurting people. And I'm sure Trout Walker could get pretty easily deputized, right? Like, he probably was. He owned the town. Like, he is an agent of the state, essentially. Pendanski is being paid with tax money.
Yeah.
He is an agent of the state, and both of those people have been sanctioned by the state to do violence, not exclusively to Black people, but particularly to Black people. I think the book is saying, if you are in a circumstance where you have no access to justice legally, there is nothing that either of these two people can do in their situations to acquire legitimate justice, you maybe have a choice. You could just like suffer in silence forever, or you could lash out in the way that you need to lash out in order to get away from the people who want to continue to harm you. It's part of Kate's thing too, is like, she is not safe around that sheriff. She will never be safe in that town again. Even if they don't literally kill her at some point, that town will just treat her like dirt forever.
We love an anti-hero, and there's a reason we don't think of Kate or Zero as villains, because they're not. They're resisting power structures and systems of inequality that seek to do violence against them and succeed in many ways, right? So like, I like that they're juxtaposed because we see in Kate's life these extremes of she kissed a black man gets murdered in cold blood, her school gets burned down, she gets assaulted by the person who was supposed to protect her and Sam. But then Zero, we get a much sort of lighter child version of it, stole shoes from Payless, gets sent to camp and talked smack at by mom, and therefore doesn't kill him, but sure does give him a good old wallop in the face with a shovel. But it's the same idea of these are outlaws, these are anti-heroes, they are resisting structures of inequality. They're not doing crimes because I like to do bad things.
Yeah. I do kind of want to talk about the role of women in this movie, because kind of across the board, the most morally complex people we meet are all women, I feel like. The boys at the camp are all like, at worst, misbehaving, maybe a little bit mean to each other sometimes, but like they're kids. And none of them deserve to be in this situation. The adult men are either, like, kind of not effective enough to be evil, or, like Pendanski, just full evil. Whereas I feel like the women are all kind of in the middle a little bit. Is that a sense that you got as well, or am I putting on my lady goggles and being too generous?
I mean, the women are more interesting, and what's interesting to me, though, is, like, both the warden and Kate were sort of turned by despicably evil men.
The same despicably evil man. Emasculation in this story is very interesting, and I genuinely don't know how I feel about it. Because one of my questions for you was going to be about Mr. Sir, and like his obsessive repetition of the idea that this is not a Girl Scout camp.
Yeah.
And his deeply weird interactions with the warden. How do you feel about the adult male characters and how they are sort of affected by the women in their spheres? Do you feel like it's negative, positive? What's the vibe?
Trout Walker is the kind of person that I think of when I think of Mr. Dr. Mr. Pendanski, fake Dr. Pendanski. I think he shares those qualities of like, this is a person who enjoys the pain of others. Yeah. There's some sadism there. Yeah. Mr. Sir is just more in the Henry Winkler camp. He's more of a Yelnats. He's ineffectual, silly, sensitive, demands respect, but doesn't sort of earn it. And we find out that his whole thing is that he's just in hiding.
He's a very, like, legally vulnerable person.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny that they invoke Girl Scout camp so often. It's clearly meant to be like, well, because girls are weak and you guys can't be weak here. But it's also like, you would learn way more legitimate survival skills at a Girl Scout camp than you are at this place. My sense is that this is supposed to be part of Mr. Sir's posturing. Like, he is so insecure in himself that he feels the need to constantly reinforce that he is a masculine man in a masculine place, and he needs to impart that onto all of the boys. None of the boys are ever reacting to anything that way. We get, like, one little, like, kind of cheeky joke at the end about, like, I bet this Mary Lou looked great in a bikini or whatever, but, like, that's the only thing we get from these boys that's even like, we think of girls as different from us or whatever. The boys don't seem to have those sort of hyper masculine, I have to prove myself to these other boys in that kind of way. At least nothing that they say out loud where they're like, I must differentiate myself from a girl, other than initial like, oh shit, the warden's a woman? All right. And then, like, not fazed by it ever again. It's only Mr. Sir who keeps obsessively returning to this idea that, like, I am a man and you are all boys and we are all men here and men must be strong and dig holes and shoot guns. And I'm so sorry, ma'am. I'm so sorry. Please don't hurt me. Because, to be clear, the most physically dangerous person at camp is the fucking warden. Because she's a psychopath.
Yeah.
So on that note, let's talk about the warden a little bit. Because I'm interested in specifically the use of makeup in this story. So we have two separate female characters who incorporate makeup into acts of physical violence. So Kate obviously has her lipstick, and the warden has her rattlesnake nail polish that she uses to claw half of Mr. Sir's face off. So why do you think Sachar chose those images as symbols for these two female characters?
There's just some interesting sort of subversion going on here of you typically think of cosmetics and makeup as being aesthetic only, but even just like associating something that's supposed to make you look pretty to the male gaze as something that is then so closely associated with violence kind of subverts that expectation. The nail polish is really interesting, though, because it's not just aesthetic anymore. It's actually the weapon itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, we sometimes get depictions of makeup being compared to armor, you know, and thus, like, aligning it with physical struggle and battle and stereotypically masculine sort of ideas. But very rarely do we have the idea of makeup as weapon. Definitely not in this way of like, no, I am the snake you should be afraid of.
Yeah.
I am the viper who will strike you in the face if you bring me an empty bag of sunflower seeds, you useless man.
Yeah.
Like, so, I mean, certainly that level. I mean, is it just that simple as like, women are powerful too, women are strong, like, because makeup and cosmetics are theoretically meant to be things that allow men to see you in the way that men want to see you, and then using that as the tool to make them see you as something else is the power there? I don't know.
I think you're right. Specifically the warden, because of the way that she is presented in both the book and the movie, like, you don't find out who the warden is until, you know, at least a third of the way into the story. And the whole time, the expectation that you are playing with, because you're in like an all-boys camp with, up to this point, all male counselors, you are assuming that the warden is also going to be a man. And so much of how the warden presents herself is to like disarm that expectation. Everything about her is meant to sort of throw you off balance, I think. Particularly because I think the assumption, especially for the book, is that the reader is going to be a boy and will be like, what? Like, I think he wants that moment of, gotcha. Yeah. You thought this was going to be a man, didn't you? It's not. And in the movie, she is styled as so feminine against this very male backdrop. It's all like a little bit off-putting. She's very clean and she's very pretty and she's wearing makeup in the middle of the desert, whereas everyone else is like physically covered in dirt from head to toe. And I think along those lines, at least one of the reasons that she is given the nail polish as her, like, weapon of choice is to be, like, particularly off-putting to a male reader or a male watcher. One of the assumptions that Mr. Sir is making is that things that are associated with girls are inherently weak. That's why he keeps telling these boys, this is not a Girl Scout camp. You will do manual labor here. You will do things that require physical strength. A thing that girls by definition do not have, right? Like, girls can't be strong. Otherwise, him consistently saying this isn't a Girl Scout camp wouldn't make any sense. And so she is taking something that's not just, like, broadly speaking feminine. She's taking something that is girly, something that not even all girls interface with. Only, like, extremely feminine girls are interacting with nail polish, and turning it into a literal weapon is meant to, like, take the most extreme version of that and put it on its head. And that's interesting. Not interesting enough to make her not just an evil character, but it is interesting. And I think Kate's lipstick is even more interesting because part of what she is reacting to, especially when she goes and shoots the sheriff and opens it with like, hey, do you still want that kiss, is a recognition by this story that what has happened to her is she is not just a person who happened to be standing nearby when an act of racist violence happened. It is also a form of sexist violence, both because he, like, tries to physically assault her when she comes to him for help and is, like, demanding that she kiss him and all of that, but the sort of tacit assumption underlying a law like a black man can't kiss a white woman is that the sexuality of white women is something that belongs exclusively to white men. That has been a thing that has been used to justify that kind of violence for a long time. This idea that, like, black men pose a particular threat to the, sanctity and virginity and purity of white women, and therefore, you're justified in doing violence to them to protect these poor, vulnerable women who will otherwise be ravaged by these horrible men. White women are not capable of making their own decisions and need to be controlled by the white men in their lives. So it's like, it drives me crazy to hear white women spouting shit like that, because it's just like this is a double-edged sword. They want an excuse to do unimpeded violence to you because they think you are their property. And I think part of why she is using the lipstick is to point out that not only are men like the sheriff violent racists, they are also violent sexists as well, who, he just would have sexually assaulted her if she had given him the chance. That's just what would have happened. That's what Trout Walker planned to do to her. He doesn't actually functionally care if she wants to marry him or not. He will take what he wants because that is what rich white men do. And so that's just sort of another level of justification that this story gives for her crime spree. She exists at this sort of nexus of having witnessed racist violence and been the recipient of sexist violence, and so she is reacting to both in a way that defies the expectations placed on her as a white woman who should just be subservient and churn out nice white babies for whatever Klan member carries her away and ties her to the railroad tracks. And also she is saying, you think my femininity is the thing that gives you the right to treat me this way, and therefore it will be the thing that gets you killed. So what do you think male viewers, particularly like young boys watching this movie, might take away from these depictions of women?
Don't yell at girls!
Don't talk to cops, don't yell at girls.
It just occurred to me how interesting it is that the warden decided that the best way to get out of digging holes for Grandpa and the best way to punish Grandpa and other awful dudes is to set up a camp specifically for boys to dig holes.
I'm not digging any more holes. Girls don't have to dig holes, only boys do.
Yeah, talk about more intergenerational trauma, but the idea that her grandfather was so despicable to her and her family that she just internalized this hatred for all men. So much so that
boys
she set up
are bad, according to
camp.
The warden.
Yeah, I don't know, it just kind of occurred to me. But that's the power of being a Trout Walker. So just remember that if you prioritize wealth at the expense of exploiting others, that your children, your children's children, and your children's grandchildren may one day be digging holes for the hottest warden alive with no freaking water. And yellow-spotted lizards biting their dicks off.
If there is a problem with the two sort of main women in this story, it is that they are, at least in part, more the warden than Kiss and Kate, strangely, even though Kate is the one who actually kills people. This idea that men as a group are, suspect, right? The warden, that's absolutely, I think, part of why she goes about things the way that she does. Part of it is she noticed a legal loophole in the American criminal justice system and decided to exploit it for her own profit and also to potentially find treasure because her grandfather fucked up so badly and spent the rest of his life trying to get back to his former level of power, and he passed that on to her, and she was both victimized by it and perpetuating it. But I do think you're right. It's not a coincidence that she was like, we're going to fill this place with boys who society has decided are bad, and I am going to do nothing whatsoever to question that.
Because to Mr. Sir's point, this is not a Girl Scout camp. It could have been. It could have been a Girl Scout camp. It could have been really nice, and the warden could have been, hey, you know what we're going to do for fun? Dig a bunch of holes. Isn't that great? Isn't that wonderful? What kind of fossils might we discover under here, girls?
Archaeology camp. It could have been fun.
Yeah, but it's not. It's punishment for boys.
This is absolutely a mentality I have seen among women in my life, which
all
is
men are pigs.
Yeah, I had a bad experience with a man. and therefore all men are bad. And it is an easy trap to fall into, particularly when you deliberately surround yourself with terrible men and boys that at least the rest of the world has told you are bad. If I hung out with Mr. Sir, Dr. Pendansky, and Trout Walker all the time exclusively, I might also be like, I think men are a mistake. I think maybe God should punish them all. But that is why the warden is a villain. It's one thing to not quite be able to escape your family's generational curse. She's not the only person in the story who doesn't manage to do that successfully. It's another to take your anger out on vulnerable people who are not able to effectively stand up for themselves. And that is what she does. And that, more than like venomous nail polish, I think is what makes her such a disturbing character.
That's a really good question for an 8th grade literature class, is like, what makes the warden a villain compared to Kate, who is an anti-hero?
Yeah.
And it's because we specifically know that Kate at least once didn't kill, and
Yes.
that was with Stanley Yelnats. And so we have to assume that she does have what you identified as a code of who she kills and who she doesn't. And what we do know is that the thing that she became famous for was robbing a bunch of banks.
Kiss Kate falls into the same sort of camp as the girl from A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. Could she, in theory, have come up with a better, less violent way to make change in the world? I mean, yeah, probably, but also...
Don't put a sex tattoo on your neck.
I think she is one of the most important characters I encountered as a young girl. I don't know. I think it's extremely important to have a character who points out very, very blatantly to an audience of children that profound racist violence is unacceptable. Profound greed and wealth hoarding are unacceptable. And that the world will try to sell you an idea of what you are supposed to be as a woman and who you should be afraid of and who you should trust to protect you and the extent to which you should be permitted to stand up for yourself. It will try to prevent you from forming solidarity with other people by selling you the idea that those people are inherently dangerous to you, and that if a person tries to sell you ideas like that, you should get away from them. Now that we've talked about how to be a good woman vigilante, let's talk about how to be a good man. So,
Can't find a better Stanley.
better Stanley. All right. So in general, I feel like this story is about finding a way to survive in those kind of adverse situations. So what kind of positive male values or attributes do you feel like this story argues helps Stanley survive at Camp Green Lake and in fact makes him a good boy?
Solidarity, brotherhood, empathy, listening, and digging.
You
want to be a good boy? Be good at digging.
No, that's what we're going to do to make people bad boys, remember?
You never know when you're going to need to dig a hole.
That's true. There are sort of a couple of values that run together in terms of things that Stanley comes to believe about himself and the other boys that help him survive and, in fact, help them reach this solution at the end where the evil is defeated, at least this one very small manifestation of the evil. When you're talking about solidarity and brotherhood, I'm interested to hear what you feel about the sort of social hierarchy that Stanley encounters at Camp Green Lake, because there clearly is this sort of structure based on who's been there long enough and who's been having the hardest time that dictates how they all behave with one another. But do you feel like the interactions that Stanley has with the other boys as he sort of learns his place in the hierarchy are all one-sided, or do you feel like he comes to benefit in a sort of reciprocal way?
One-sided meaning like X-Ray gets to eat his bread and like
because we do see a lot of
okay.
that at first where it seems like X-Ray is sort of just bullying him a little bit. Is that just like X-Ray exerting power for the hell of it?
No. What I love about this movie is there's no part in the beginning where Stanley is in denial that he's somehow different than these other boys, that he's like, I'm innocent and these other boys are bad, and then he has to learn a terrible lesson about how actually no one's really bad, maybe many people are just in the wrong place at the wrong time. So like I said solidarity because he very much identifies, even without saying it overtly, that all of these boys are being treated unfairly.
Yeah.
They've all done different things or not done different things. We don't get into it because it doesn't matter. What matters is that they are all facing a despicable evil, and that the only way to survive it or endure it is together. And so I think what Stanley gets out of this relationship is more intangible. He gets this sense of brotherhood and camaraderie where if he were about to let a rattlesnake bite him, there would at least be a gang of children being like, "No, Stanley, don't do it. It's not that bad. We love you, bro."
Yeah. I mean, it's unfortunate to say, like, bonding through hardship, but that is what they are doing. That's the process of forming solidarity, right? It's like recognizing that you have something in common with other people and trying to work towards a common goal, or at least to kind of help each other survive in certain ways. And like there's clearly still like some bullying and like they get into fights with each other and stuff because that's part of human nature. And it's interesting to me that they sort of form their own moral code beneath the overarching moral code where like the boys all have an understanding with each other that like none of them are fully bad, none of them are fully good. They're all on equal terms, more or less in this place. They're all like facing the same sort of foe. And they do kind of care about enforcing a certain level of fairness, which is why they react so badly to Zero digging the holes, because they are not participating in that part of the exchange. There is this pocket of community within the community where like Stanley and Zero have both identified that one of them has a need that the other one can fill. That is a thing that sometimes to people on the outside of that dynamic looks unfair. It looks like a hoarding of resources. And that's the sort of breakdown that we see happen with Zigzag. Zigzag just sees Zero digging somebody else's hole, and nobody's coming to dig Zigzag's hole. But you already know how to read. The exchange that's happening here isn't Stanley has decided he's too good to dig holes. It's that two people have found that each of them has a need the other one can fill. And sometimes that has nothing to do with you. And that doesn't mean that this whole system is breaking down and is unfair. It just means that sometimes certain people have needs that means that they get a little bit more of a certain type of resource. And that is also part of what it means to live in a society. I paid off my student loans already. Why should other people not have to pay off their student loans? Get out of here, Zigzag.
I think something else that Stanley receives as part of this cohort is in that scene that I said I liked so much, where after they start calling him caveman, he's like slouching in his chair in the group therapy session, and he's just like relaxed and kind of cool because this is presumably the first time in his life when he has been able to discover himself for himself, as opposed to being Stanley Yelnats IV, literally a person who was named by his family into a curse that he has inherited. And this theme of names comes up in that scene where Pendanski suggests that all the boys need to be called by their government names, that their identities and their paths are predetermined for them. And the boys are offering a small taste of liberation of like, oh, but what if you weren't Stanley Yelnats IV? What if you didn't have a family curse? What if you found your own way to exist and participate in the world, in a society? And I think that's like the biggest lesson that Stanley gets is like, oh my God, like, I get to choose. I get to choose my life. Like, I'm not just bound to an unlucky hand, a family curse, my race, my religion, how people view me, the lipstick I wear, etc.
This is obviously not one of the conversion therapy sort of camps, but the insistence on calling someone the name that your parents gave you, as opposed to a name that you and your community have chosen, certainly has some parallels there as well. Being seen for something beyond the curse you were born into, whatever that curse may be, is absolutely a gift of true community as opposed to the sort of stereotypical structure that someone like Pendanski represents. You in no way can like collaborate with the world to decide who you are. You have to be who I have decided that you will be, and everything else is sinful and bad and must be beaten out of you.
You got that, Miss Ma'am? No more of this Mr. Sir crap.
Oh, someone do the queer reading of Mr. Sir. It's out there, I'm sure. And I think the last sort of piece of the community that Stanley builds here kind of harkens back to what you were talking about before, which I think is maybe one of the other theses of this story, which is like a real man keeps his promises. Mm-hmm. Especially in the movie, that's literally what breaks the magical curse, is Stanley carrying Zero up the mountain and singing the song to him. I love that scene in both the movie and the book. We talked about it a little bit before, but it's not just him giving a person a piggyback up a mountain and singing a song. It is him sacrificing his own bodily safety in order to take care of another boy. And it is an expression of caring that in a moment where, like, Zero cannot help him. At least in the book, Zero is fully passed out and potentially dying at the time that scene happens. It would be easier and probably safer for Stanley to just leave him behind and climb up the mountain himself. It is a mark of a type of sacrifice that he doesn't do that and instead decides to save someone and take care of someone who, at least in that moment, can't offer him anything in return, at least that he knows of. It turns out to break a generational magical curse, but he doesn't know that because Stanley doesn't believe in the curse. He just does that for Zero out of the pure goodness of his heart. We have talked a little bit about this idea of bodily sacrifice before on the show when we talked about It's a Wonderful Life and the sort of type of male sacrifice that George Bailey represents early in the story. You know, if I died, my family would have money and that's all I'm good for. Like, I need to give my all for my family, and when I can't anymore, I should just die and get out of their way, and that's what I'm supposed to do as a man. And in the book, even as, again, this quote kind of comes from the end of the story when Stanley is in the desert with Zero and is like, I do not know that I am going to survive this. He has this quote where he kind of sums up something that George Bailey could stand to learn, I think, which is, you know, even as he is like risking part of his health to save Zero, he is not being Rambo last stand reckless. He is like trying to be as smart as he possibly can in these last moments of the book. And he has a reason for that. Spencer, if you wouldn't mind reading that quote for me.
What scared Stanley the most about dying wasn't his actual death. He figured he could handle the pain. It wouldn't be much worse than what he felt now. In fact, maybe at the moment of his death, he would be too weak to feel pain. Death would be a relief. What worried him the most was the thought of his parents not knowing what happened to him, not knowing whether he was dead or alive. He hated to imagine what it would be like for his mother and father, day after day, month after month, not knowing, living on false hope. For him, at least, it would be over. For his parents, the pain would never end.
Yeah, so that's just kind of a good reminder to end on here is your participation in community, while it will sometimes ask you to perform acts of service for people who are perhaps not able to reciprocate at that time, should not come at the expense of your safety, despite what many superhero movies tried to tell you is right and good and correct for a man.
Hey kids, Superman here, reminding you the greatest gift you can give to mankind is killing yourself.
No!
Oh, no?
No.
Oh, that's the opposite?
Your parents want you to come home at the end of the day, if they're good parents.
So I guess the last question is, how many holes are you digging for this one?
0.
Oh.
I'm not digging any fucking holes.
You're giving it a 0 out of 10 holes? What's your rating?
My rating? Okay. On a scale of 1 to 10...
0, that's a good joke.
0!
That's a character's
I'm digging 0.
Also, I dig 0 as well. And you know what else kind of 0s I dig? 0 bars, the candy bar. You ever had one of those?
We've been in this closet for like 2.5 hours.
Have you? Had a 0 bar?
No.
They're delicious. Continue. What's your rating?
I would say like a 9.
Yeah? Why? Why are you taking a point off? I think this might be a perfect movie.
You think this is a
It might be. I give it a 9, 9.5. I want to give it a 10, especially because you once said I gave It's a Wonderful Life a 10. And if I gave it a 10, I think Holes is a 10.
Okay.
Might be a 9.5. Might be a 9.5.
I mean, I don't know.
It's a good movie, especially for kids that I like that we talked about that quote about people's first experience questioning the sort of like idea of law and order and the faults of how we it's just a joke to even say try to rehabilitate people, because we don't. We just torture people and make them worse. And we just do it because it makes rich people richer. Like this, there's no secret to it. So burn it all down. Go kissing Kate Barlow. That's what I say.
Oh, they are remaking Holes. I meant to talk about this when we were talking about women. Guess what? They're doing a gender-flipped version of Holes for Disney Plus.
So it is a Girl Scout camp now.
It's a Girl Scout. It's not a Girl Scout camp. It's a girls' prison camp. No telling if they're gonna flip the genders of all the adult characters too.
I hope not.
I don't want to see the male version of Kissing Kate Barlow or the male version of the Warden.
Not at all.
I don't. Yikes.
Yeah.
Yikes.
I guess we'll check it out.
I'm not going to check it out. I'm not paying for Disney Plus again just to watch another version of a thing I've already seen before. Disney, make original content if you want my money.
Fair enough. Speaking of original content, you can follow us at A Safe Place for Boys on Instagram, email us, we're on YouTube, and we do it all ourselves. No AI bullshit here.
Tell us about your favorite book to movie adaptation. Maybe we'll talk about it. Maybe.
Maybe.
Mostly. All right. We'll see you next time for more compassionate conversations about masculinity in media.
Digging up that hole, digging up that